Hey guys, welcome to the InkGuild Podcast with your host.
Are we actually good to start now?
Fuck you.
I took damage. Oh no!
Good job, Dean. Put him on the spot. What have you done?
Good at it.
If Jesus was real, he would have said wubba the dub dub.
Literally introducing a mystery sister never works, Sherlock.
I fucking hate Sherlock.
I'm actually a rock. How dare you?
I hate you.
Before she gets to be.
Stop roasting me.
I vote dragons.
I vote dragons too.
I also vote
I was about to
dragons.
say.
It looks like he's delivering you mail.
I feel like there's a metaphor in there somewhere.
Bullshit. Is that really?
Excuse me?
Oh shit, bye.
Okay. Just go to fucking therapy.
If I develop Sims, delete the channel.
We need to start a revolution.
And you know what? I'm gonna say it. All of them are fucking idiots.
25 is technically you.
Say your morning routine.
And that's fucking it. Excuse me?
Where are my Grecias at? Yo.
I'd like you to rephrase that, Sam.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dean. Welcome back to the InkGuild Podcast, and welcome to the Season 4 finale. Before we get to tonight's topic, I do just want to touch briefly on Season 4 in general, kind of like just be, I guess, a little bit reflective for a moment. This was, I think, arguably one of the most fun I've ever had in a season. And I say that knowing that we've been having I've been having so much fun doing these podcasts since we started it about a year ago. But I think every season just gets better. We keep adding a lot more things. There's always plenty of stuff to talk about. And really, like, Season 4 was pretty much the best example of everything that we have been doing so far. It's providing knowledgeable insights from a group of amateurs, no less. However, it's still a conversation between friends. It's still something that we as friends talk about already off conversation. And the fact that we've had the InkGuild Podcast as our platform to share our ideas openly with each other and for a wider audience, like, it's still fun. It's still really fun to do that. And yeah, like, Season 4 allowed us to talk about not just important topics such as queer coding, queer coding, and I think Instagram poetry, starting a new story, things that are helpful for creative writers like us. However, it also allowed us to have, I think, the most fun conversations that we've ever had on these podcasts. So we've had our 3-hour Shadow and Bone episode. We've had 3-hour episodes with the Soy Boys, the friends of mine from high school, on video game protagonists. We've had lots of fun talking about vampires, werewolves, fantasy races, Cassandra Clare, villains. It's been a loaded season, and I really couldn't have done any of that and any of this without my guests tonight. So, as usual, I'll have a roll call. Alex?
Hello.
Gabe?
Hello.
Brooke?
Hi.
Marie-Soleil?
Hello.
And Tyler?
Hi.
Sweet. We are the Ink. Oh no, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, yeah. We have been here. We've been here. I don't know what I'm talking about. I think it's been a while since we've done a check-in, guys. So let's just quickly do that. Like, it's been too long, I think, since we've really had time to talk about our projects very briefly because of just the long conversations we've been having this season. So let's just do a quick check-in. I think lately for me, I've been working at Xeno a little bit more. I say a little bit because I'm still not progressing as much as I would like. However, I do have the endings to chapters 23 and 24. So that will conclude Act 2, as I'd like to say. It's kind of like in between chapters 1 and 12, that is Act 1. 13 to 24 is Act 2. There is still plenty of, there is, each in their own way, they have their own contained plot beats. And while I haven't finished or started really chapter 23, I've been adding in little bits of information about Porter and Magna's relationship, about some conflicts here and there. I've been taking a lot of account into what Tyler had said, because he is the one who is most familiar with my work so far. And we did a private workshop quite a while ago, and I've been keeping a lot of his notes into account. But otherwise, yeah, it's, aside from Zeno, I've also just been, working away at the podcasts, primarily focusing on our YouTube output, our Spotify output, and TikTok. But that's all with me. Let's check in with Alex.
I've not been writing a lot. I've mostly been doing a lot of world building. As I feel like that's all I've said recently about this. But mostly I've been focusing on my world of Paya, because we're playing D&D next week, and it's motivating me to actually do stuff.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I hope so.
Yeah,
that's what I've been working on.
Gabe, let's check in with you.
I've also been doing a lot of world building stuff for my book Lemonheart lately. I haven't made as much progress with it as I would have liked to by this point in the year, but I've sort of taken on a couple of writing exercises and doing some world building stuff to sort of get me in that headspace to write it. So hopefully I'll get back on track.
Sounds good. Brooke, let's check in with you.
I haven't been doing that much writing either. I've been doing a lot of visual work, I suppose, like drawing more maps and characters and whatnot, and also doing a little bit of focus on my other story that I've been working on, but not that much.
Cool. Marie-Soleil, let's check in with you.
I haven't really been doing a lot of writing with job and life, but I've been working on backstories for D&D characters, and the character that from my story that is in the open universe that Tyler created, I realized that she's kind of turned into a Mary Sue, so I'm going back over her character design and correcting things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I hate when that happens. That's happened to me, I think, twice with previous characters that I've been developing. So, yeah, best of luck. Hopefully it pays off.
Yeah, it's we talk about the universe, and Tyler tells me things that he's come up with, and I'm like, oh, that'd be great for the story. And then I'm like, wait, so many things have happened to this character before, and she's not even 20 years old. Fuck, she can't do all of this stuff.
Yeah, tragic backstory galore. Not always recipes for good characters. Except for Kaz, I think, but that's a whole other conversation. We talked about that in the Shadow and Bone episode. I'm going on a tangent again. Sorry.
It's very off topic.
Yeah. Tyler, let's check in with you finally.
I don't think you're going off topic. I think you're just repping previous episodes, telling people to go back and watch. So go back and watch the Shadow of Bone episode. Wait, Shadow of Bone? Shadow and Bone. Bones don't have shadows. They're inside you. What? If they're casting a shadow, there's a fucking problem. I have been
the more
working
you know.
on my... Yeah, if your bone is casting a shadow, probably call an ambulance. Holy fuck. I've been writing my short story for my Mythic Cosmos. I'm loosely working on a plan for another one. I have been working on Dungeons and Dragons things, a session for my usual group, a session for my parents, and working on a new little setting in the background. Yeah, I think that's all that's actually creative writing based that I've been doing.
Cool. All right. that was the check-in and the last check-in for season 4. As we kind of wrap up then, let's get into our main topic tonight, which for many who have seen the title, it is focusing on social issues in modern storytelling. I warn and emphasize this right now. It is going to be, I think, one of the more loaded discussions that we've done so far on this season and in the podcast in general, because there is a lot that we are going to be touching on. I think more so than we do in any other previous session. When we talk about, authors like Cassandra Clare, when we touch on representation, we do those in small chunks. However, tonight will be solely focused on these important discussions that we need to be addressing. So we'll be touching on, I guess, to kind of describe how tonight will work. I've already told this to everyone else, but I guess just as a quick refresher, we have 4 main umbrella topics that we'll be discussing. First, we'll be touching on LGBTQIA+ in modern stories. We have kind of a set list of things, or we kind of have a list of things, however, it's not set, so where the discussion goes from there, we'll be waiting to find out. Next, we'll be touching on racism. Next is sexism / the binary, so focusing more or less on, men and women in stories. And finally, we'll be concluding with mental health. So all of those will be timestamped on YouTube and on Spotify for everyone's convenience if you want to just skip on that. And I think that's it. That's how tonight will work out. It might end up being a long episode because, as I've said, because these discussions are very, very loaded and very important, they may end up stretching well over 45 minutes per umbrella topic. So we'll see how it goes. Whether this becomes a single upload or split into 2 parts, that remains to be seen. But let's not waste any more time and just get straight into it. First, we'll be talking about the LGBTQIA+ community and the representation of such in the media. When we say the media, it is more or less just, books, TV shows, video games, movies, anime, and and the corresponding representations of such. I've noted it down in our list for today that we were going to touch quickly on queer coding and queer baiting, which Alex and I have done in previous episodes. However, I think because we have more people here who either may or may not have their own input on it, let's just quickly refresh everyone's memory. So, Alex, if I could quickly get you to quickly summarize what queer coding and queer baiting is for everyone's context.
For sure. They're not exactly the same, but they do have a lot of similarities. Essentially, queer coding is when characters and stories are kind of hinted at or subtextually implied to be queer in some way, without being explicitly queer. Queer baiting is a way in which writers can do this to imply that something queer is going to happen within their story without having to commit to doing it. That's the basic way of putting it.
Could I also get you to touch on heteronormativity really quick, because that is also what we had, that's also part of the series that you and I had done. So Alex and we had touched on heteronormativity, I think, in season 2, queer baiting in season 3, and queer coding in season 4. So
yeah, and then heteronormativity is the idea that everyone is heterosexual, and there are certain expectations about the way characters and people in general act as a result of that, i.e. men are attracted to women and want to be with women, and women are attracted to men and want to be with men. Then you have your usual heterosexual relationships and the roles and tropes and stereotypes that come along with that. such as, men being strong and protective and women being like meek and gentle.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks, Alex. It's much better than I could have described it, honestly. So, yeah, let's touch into that. I know that some people have listened in on those sessions and maybe not, but if you have listened in on those sessions, so queer coding, queer baiting, or heteronormativity, was there something you guys had learned when Alex and I were speaking on that?
Well, I haven't particularly listened to those episodes. Remember, I'm still kind of new. I'm not caught up yet.
Fair enough, then. Yeah, Gabe, you were going to say?
I don't remember if I was on one of those episodes, and I think I listened to the other, but I remember... Well, I just remember, like, it expanded the issue in how I perceived it as, like, someone who isn't part of the LGBT community. It definitely, like, gave me a new perspective on, like, the topic. Because, like, up to that point, I don't think I understood what exactly, like, queer baiting and queer coding, like meant or entailed. Like, I barely really knew what it meant. So, like, it definitely, like, gave me a fresh perspective on the topic from actually understanding what it means. Because I feel like the times that I had heard about it in, like, articles and stuff, it wasn't explained. It was sort of like just like it was sort of like understood that everyone reading the article knew what it meant, and I didn't really want to ask because I was like, I didn't want to, like, be like, oh, I don't know what this means, but I didn't truly know what it means. And I think, like, yeah, from listening to those episodes and being on one, maybe, I don't remember, but it definitely, I have a new perspective on it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
I did have a question, Alex, about your definitions of queer coding and baiting. In the way you worded it, and correct me if I'm wrong, you sounded almost of a negative opinion of general queer coding. Is that correct? I didn't hear the episode, so maybe refresh.
I don't view queer coding as an inherently negative thing, but I do think it has a specific, like, time and place for where it's necessary, and I think if we can move past the point of it being necessary, that would be ideal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I agree with that.
Yeah, just to quickly rephrase what Day and I touched on in the episode, we were kind of neutral come the end of it, so we had decided that, queer coding has more, like, it really just depends on who's utilizing it. Like, I think quickly to touch on queer coding that I didn't touch on in the actual episode, there's a recent example that I think utilizes queer coding at its best, and that is through the Mitchells versus the Machines. The main character, Katie Mitchell, is queer coded very, very wonderfully in the sense that you can kind of like, a lot of things that are associated with the queer community are either present or more subtle, and that doesn't ever really take away from her as a character, while also still properly representing a lot of what these things stand for in the community, being different, being different, being expressive, being comfortable with yourself, and sticking to what you want and what you know. But yeah, I think ultimately queer coding itself is a pretty neutral concept. When it starts deviating into things like queer baiting and heteronormativity, Alex and I were largely like, this isn't always, like, shit has happened before.
And also things like the gay villain trope, which utilizes a lot of queer coding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and there's one thing that, Alex, you said in your definition that really struck a chord with me, was when you said an author can use queer coding or queer baiting without ever necessarily having to fully commit to having a queer character. They just code them as such, and it's never explicitly stated. And personally, in my opinion, and we can segue this into proper versus improper representation if we like, but encoding a character queer, but never actually explicitly stating it, just using those tones to try and attract an LGBTQ plus audience while also maintaining, you know, a heteronormative audience, it seems a little disingenuous to me. And the clearest example I kind of have of this right off the top of my head is, of course, J.K. Rowling's and her comment about Dumbledore's sexuality. It seems like a very blatant and improper use of trying to claim a character as anything but heteronormative just for the clout of it without actually committing and making the character as such.
Yeah, and so in the case where it is someone using that coding to try and catch that audience without committing to it, that is usually classified as queer baiting, specifically. What, you know, J.K. Rowling and, you know, companies like Disney have been doing a lot recently. I've heard some people refer to as queer coding or queer baiting, I mean. I've also heard a new term come into play called queer catching, which is kind of like a step below queer baiting, where it's stating that a character is queer in some way without showing that, without even really coding that sometimes in the media presented.
Yeah, Disney has been pretty bad with that lately, or been pretty bad with that in general, I think. Like, you kind of think of like all the announcements from previous movies being like, oh, hey, this is insert Disney's first openly something. And really, is it really their
I think they've had
thing?
like 6 first openly gay characters. If I was like, I think there was an article I read, it was somewhere around that number that they've had 6
or 7
first.
Yeah,
it's getting ridiculous.
Yeah, which is, if you're not going to really think, I think this goes without saying, but if you're not going to actually commit to either properly like representing this character as queer, or at least doing a good job with your queer coding, that is super disingenuous. Like, again, it goes without saying, like that's just touting this character for media attention, which sucks. Makes you a shit company.
I love how we're talking about this in June, by the way. Very on point. Very nice. I like it.
Yeah, happy Pride Month, everybody.
Happy Pride.
Yeah, this will be going up, I think, come the end of Pride Month, or come the end of June, actually, because this week I've taken a break because of the new Minecraft update.
Oh yeah, gotta tame them oxalotls. Yep, I know.
They're very cute.
Sorry, tangent. Let's get back to the discussion. So, I think, I guess we can probably now segue into our next talking point on the list that we had said. So that is proper versus improper representation. Like we had, because queer coding, queer baiting, heteronormativity, and queer catching now, like those are just things that we can identify as when it comes to the discussion around the queer community in the media. But like when it comes to representation, let's touch on that. So someone take it away.
I have plenty of examples. I'll stick with a most recent one for what I consider is some pretty good representation. Show of hands on the Discord. Who's watched Invincible on Amazon?
Hey. I haven't watched it. I know how it ends, and I know a lot of its secrets. So I guess I've kind of watched it.
So me and Marie-Soleil recently binged it, and we definitely have some complaints. We do. Not to mention the fact that it's basically just, the Injustice League. But I digress. The one character, the main character's best friend, William, who is gay openly. Initially, we looked at him and we saw, the token gay best friend. That is what he immediately appeared as. However, he kind of gets a whole episode into a story about him that I really liked, because you see quite a bit more depth of his character, and also the fact that something kind of traumatic does happen in that episode, not trying to spoil anything, and he reacts to it. It's more, he's a person, he's not just, hey, gay best friend, which I really did quite enjoy. Marie-Soleil also has a point on this guy.
He lived to the end of season 1, and there's only one season.
Hell yeah. You love to see it. Hey, all media companies, stop burying your gays. Fuck you if you do.
So I did like his representation. That show has quite a bit of good representation. I was going to get into that in our next umbrella topic as well. But yeah, that one character in recent media really, really sold that show for me, is a lot of the little things they did in trying to make representation well done, as opposed to just, we have to have a token gay character. No, let's give him a whole episode and arc. I don't know what they did in the comics, because Invincible is based off a comic run. I have no idea what they did in that, but the show played him very well.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I guess if we're doing examples really quick on proper representation, and I can I'll need, likely Gabe has also seen this with me, but I've touched on the Mitchells versus the Machines earlier, and holy fuck, it is so good. It really is. All of the hype surrounding that movie is completely justifiable. It is 100% amazing, and I've already touched on why I think in general Katie Mitchell is a very, very good example of a queer repped character, of good queer rep, I think is what I'm trying to say. They nail a lot of important point, they nail a lot of what makes the queer community queer to an extent. Obviously it is very wide, the queer community, but just a lot of things that people kind of associate within our community and within queerness in general, Katie Mitchell really embodies well, and doesn't ever feel like it's just either for clout or just kind of disrespecting it. She's a wonderful character in a wonderful movie. And I think there's one other point that Katie Mitchell does really well, but we're not on that umbrella topic yet. But yeah, that is, I think, yeah, I do want to talk about Katie Mitchell. So Gabe, if you want to help me out.
I mean, yeah, that movie, I think it did a really good job, representing with the Katie being a lesbian character.
Mm-hmm.
I think, well, it's one of the few examples, I think, where a movie where it's where I saw the trailer, and I don't know what scene it was. It was one of those flashback sequences at the very beginning when she's when she's that whole wardrobe montage sequence, mm-hmm. where she's a bunch of costumes and stuff. I don't know what it was. I think it was the checkered polo shirt and the checkered hat combo that I was like, oh, this bitch is gay.
Yeah.
And
it's
and then I was like, okay, is it just giving me the vibe, or is she actually gay in a mainstream animated movie? Because that would be badass. And then she totally was, and it was totally badass.
Mm-hmm. If we're talking about the moment that I knew she was queer, it's pretty much just being a film major. And I don't mean that in any disrespect. I know that a lot of queer, a lot of the people that I know that are queer are very expressive and very creative, especially when it comes to the arts. And it seems that way for quite a lot of people. A lot of things. Again, I don't want to assume, but when it comes to queerness and expression, queer people love being expressive, and they love being creative, and they love having just the power to create, I think. So that was, I think, the moment. The wardrobe, yeah, that was definitely a thing, because when she was going through the wardrobe scene, and I'm like, Oh, dude, these are the most queer outfits I've ever seen, and it is perfect. Yeah. Brooke, have
I don't
you
know if this is a.
seen-
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just asking Brooke if she's seen it because I think Alex hasn't yet.
I
Yeah,
have
so-
not.
Brooke, what was it?
Yes, I did.
Oh, let's get your opinion on it then. Let's get your thoughts.
Well, like I said, the shoes.
The shoes, yeah. What was it?
The room in
Converse
general.
fans?
Converse, I believe.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
the room, the shoes, the outfit, everything. I was like, aha. And then, of course, you see the pin. I was like, whoa, okay.
Mhm.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
I think like also too when they were doing I think at one point when they were doing the rain, like I think at one point in one of the more like visually stunning scene, like I say that vaguely because there are some like amazing visuals in the scene, but like it was just Katie being Katie, I think, and like expressing herself and whatever, and there were just like rainbows and shit, and I'm like, wait, hold on, is that is a very specific rainbow? There's no way that like that's not on purpose. Like, I'm fairly sure they could have easily just stuck with like the, you know, the original rainbow, which obviously represents queerness in general, but just like that very specific one.
Sorry.
Were you gonna add something, Marie-Soleil, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted
okay.
to say something at the end of Korra, the Avatar, when Korra and Asami, they walk off into the spirit realm, and the colors of the sky reflect the colors of the I want to say the bisexual flag or the lesbian flag. I can't remember at the moment.
I don't remember that well. Brooke, it was you. Like, you're the one who's like, I know you're the one who's seen Legend of Korra more like pretty recently.
I don't know the specific colors, but I've seen other people talking about that specifically as well, saying that they also saw the colors of one of the flags. But I don't remember which.
I just googled it real fast. That's definitely the bi flag.
The bi-colors? Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would expect so because everyone jokes about that all the time. Like both of them did Mako, but then they ended up with each other at the end.
As they should. Queens.
As they should. It was the only answer.
In the TV show, if I'm remembering correctly, they don't officially become a couple in the TV show. However, in the comics that followed it, they do. And it's also revealed that Aang and Katara's daughter is also not straight, I believe.
Yeah,
lesbian.
I think in the case of Korra, they weren't allowed to explicitly show them like kissing or anything. So the holding hands and smiling at each other was the best they can do.
Yeah.
Because censorship.
That network did that show dirty.
Yeah.
They did it so dirty. The times that they aired the show, like, but that's not a part of this.
Sorry, Brooke, what was that?
Oh, I'm just saying, like, yeah, it's good that they did the whole comics thing, but also the creators have mentioned multiple times, like, that was canon. Like, they are a couple.
Yeah.
So it's not, like, super hidden. It's just, it wasn't put on screen, unfortunately.
Avatar Kyoshi was also not straight.
Yeah, she was not a girlfriend.
Yeah. Oh, I love Kyoshi so much.
And if we're
I love
talk
Kyoshi.
about good representation, like Avatar, Last Airbender, and Legend of Korra, were targeted for like surprisingly young audiences to even get that much representation through, which I think is very good, and we definitely need more of going forward.
Yeah. Korra opened the door for future shows to be able to do more.
Yeah, that's what, reason number 73 that like The Legend of Korra and Avatar are amazing shows.
Just fucking top tier, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Just made me remember that they're doing like that Madagascar children's show with their children, and they have a non-binary character now, also voiced by a non-binary actor.
Madagascar?
Yeah.
Oh.
I didn't know about Madagascar. I know they're doing that with Sandman, or with the Sandman thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Neil Gaiman's Netflix thing. I like feel free to correct me if I'm wrong for anyone listening, but as of now, Neil Gaiman is producing or is helping with with Netflix's adaptation of the Sandman comics, which Gabe has touched on in episode 1 actually. And like, it's apparently supposed to be very diverse, which is wonderful to hear.
Yes, that's good to hear.
Personal thing with how dirty they did the Lucifer series based on the Lucifer comics, which are a sideshow of the Sandman comics. I'm deeply worried by what they're going to do with the plot and the characters. But diversity is great. That's a wonderful insert. But
as far as I know, Gaiman is like directly involved in this one. Like Lucifer, I think he was I think he makes royalties from it, but I don't think he had like a writing role, or I don't think he was a producer, but he's like directing parts of this. Not directing, but he's like a part of the writing team for this show, as far as I know. And he's like had a heavy role in like the casting, I think.
Well,
I think he's like
good at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But we've done a lot of proper representation.
Right.
And
One more. I had one more thing that I wanted to say about proper representation. And have any of you guys watched The Hollow?
Yes,
No.
I have actually.
The Hollow is a show on Netflix, and it sucks that they canceled it after the second season. But there's 3 main characters, Adam, Kai, and Myra. And in the first season, they all basically have amnesia. None of them remember their name. But Kai has a thing for Myra, and Myra has an attraction to Adam, and I think she kisses him, but then they both realize like that's weird. And you find out why it's weird in the second season when they have their memories back in the second episode when Adam comes out and says like, I'm gay, you've got the wrong idea, to Kai, who assumed that they were dating. And he even has a rainbow flag in his bedroom.
Yeah. That was, I thought that was handled well too. It wasn't like made a big deal out of, but it was like explicitly clear.
That's a shame it's only gotten thing. I always love hearing when queer rep especially gets it right, but then suddenly it's like axed just when it begins.
Yeah, it kind of sucks, but like there's 2 years in between the 2 seasons. So there wasn't a lot of, the second season didn't get as much attention from fans because Netflix didn't promote it as much, and the 2-year gap, people didn't realize when they released the second season.
I wasn't expecting a second season either after how the first season ended, to be honest.
But yeah, I guess with like Tyler was trying to say, with all of these like really good examples of proper representation, let's now get into some of the improper ones. I think where do I start? Disney. Where do I just? How does it? Where do I don't know fucking where to start. Star Wars. Maybe
that's still Disney.
That I know. Thanks, Alex. It's not like I was. Damn it. Okay. Well, joke's over. Just talk.
Are we going to start with like the example I think we're going to start with? Do I get to scream about it again?
Yes, you can scream about it. You can scream about it.
You can key it up though. I don't want to get it wrong.
No, I think you can take it from here.
Is it Finn and Poe? Are we talking about Finn and Poe?
It is Finn and Poe.
Yeah, Finn and Poe is the dumbest. Okay. I know that it was never like officially canon, but he fucking bit his lip when he saw him in his fucking jacket. He bit his lip and slapped him on the shoulder and was like, keep it suits you.
They're gay.
They're gay as fuck.
They're absolutely
gay.
The actors were down
and the actors
for it.
even were like, they want gay.
The actors, yeah.
Disney, you cowards.
We're doing some female love interests, and it's like, I ain't get to get because no.
The worst part was like it's not even just from a representation is very important, and I don't mean to downplay that, but just from a storytelling perspective, it would have been better. They had better chemistry with each other than Finn had with either of his female love interests. They had like Finn had better chemistry, or Poe had better chemistry with Finn than with his weird robot ex-girlfriend on Hideo Kojimbo planet. I can't remember what the fuck it was called. The Sand Planet. I don't know. I don't know.
Jakku,
I think.
Zora. Yeah, he had better chemistry with Finn than with her. I don't even remember her. It was vaguely implied that they were a thing. It felt very forced and stupid, and like they were just desperately trying to get people to not think they were gay after Poe bit his fucking lip. Slapped him on.
Queer baiting.
I would also say they took it a step
yeah.
further and made them kind of like not even friends in the third movie.
Yeah, they kept them apart.
The whole friend group was just so angry that entire movie. And it's like, can you stop that? Like they were always fighting and bickering. It's like, geez, are they married or do they just hate each other now? They were supposed to be lovers.
Mm-hmm. Like it's to bring the conversation around, like, you know, Gabe was like, he didn't necessarily take it out of the conversation, but just to bring the fact of like the queerness, I think, back in. It's two men, and I think that's what's important here. It's I don't know, again, feel free to correct me, but it's a lot easier for some people to accept two women in a queer relationship in media because of sexualization, which is
because
weird.
of sexism and heteronormativity.
Yeah. So on top of that, when it came to two men, especially two men in a big franchise, that meant a lot. That was, if they had really stuck through with it and committed and hadn't been cowards, it would have been huge for not just Star Wars in general, but in any entertainment franchise in the modern world. It is huge to have that kind of representation for two men, for two leading men especially, and
two leading men of color.
Yeah, exactly. What the fuck, Disney?
They're cowards.
They're cowards.
Come on, Disney.
Cowards.
Get it together.
Come on.
So I'm a big Star Wars buff, but considering that the characters weren't openly gay, I think we're kind of talking about like more queer baiting as opposed to, you know, misrepresentation. And I don't have any specific examples of this off the top of my head. I did not do enough research while I was napping. But I'm going to talk about.
It's not like. Yeah, it's like you're just asleep.
Well, I got the vaccine, so I've got that nice Bill Gates microchip in my arm, and I'm surprised I don't get to just surf Google while I'm sleeping. That'd be a great fucking feature, Billy Gates. But improper representation, and again, don't have any specific examples. I just know the type of improper representation that always gets me the most. And to some extent, it refers to tokenism, in that this character is gay, or this character is a lesbian. Guess what? That's their only personality. Every interaction you have with them, everything they say relates to as such. Terribly sorry, this is not a person. This is a placeholder. And nothing gets me more riled up than that. And again, I don't have any specific examples, usually because when I see a specific example of this, I shut the show off because I can't fucking take it.
That's fair. If we have a little bit of time, I'd love to trash on Riverdale for like 10 seconds. And talk about
10 seconds,
and talk
really?
about Kevin, who is the token gay on Riverdale, who, I'm not even joking, they have tried to fit like every single gay stereotype into this one character. Like, you know, you got the gay best friend, you've got like the insecure, but then you've also got like the not insecure at all. And then for some reason at some point they decided that apparently being a gay man basically means you're a drag queen. Like
oh my god.
Like if you want to talk about bad representation, I mean, Riverdale doesn't do anything right, but like, oh my god.
Oh my god. It was a good idea thing. It was a good idea that we didn't just exhaust all of our talking points in the CW episode. So then we can just trash about Riverdale for every single season moving forward. It was a genius.
We're talking about CW representation. I got stuff to say.
Go for it.
Go off.
So I mentioned about the reboot of Roswell. And like I just touched on it, but like So Michael and Alex in high school, they apparently had this kiss, and then Alex's father catches them and breaks Michael's hand with a hammer.
Okay.
And then as adults, Alex, he goes off to join the military. Michael becomes a troublesome adult and causes fights at the bar Maria works at. Maria and Alex are best friends. For 10 years, he doesn't tell her about Michael, because he's ashamed of Michael, not the fact that he was gay. Maria knew he was gay, but he's ashamed of Michael, so he doesn't tell her until he finds out that Maria and Michael hook up. And then later on, after more stuff happens, they have a threesome. And after that threesome, Maria tells Michael to pick her or Alex.
Wow.
They all end up separated. None of them end up dating each other, if I remember correctly. I never watched the very end of the reboot because it pissed me off. They made the show that was originally about like high school teenagers and everything. They made it more gritty with adults because it's CW. But yeah.
Wow,
Wow.
Yeah, that sounds like a good segue into what you wanted to talk about, Tyler.
Thank you. I was about to make that segue myself.
Yeah.
So, for those of you that don't know, I'm a pansexual polyamorous vampire. Hi, that's me. And as such, the one thing that has been pissing me off more and more and more is representations of polyamory in media, specifically the vilification of it. And I have a few very specific examples. One of the most blatant ones is the show Sabrina, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, the new one that was on Netflix for 4 seasons. I watched the whole damn thing. I will say, I didn't mind the first season. It was rather enjoyable. After that, it was just a constant downhill slide. One of the big things was that witches did not ascribe to Christian heteronormative monogamous relationship styles. One of the main characters, Nicholas Scratch, he is openly bi or pansexual. It's never stated which, and he's shown in several orgies and polyamorous shindigs. By the end of the show, he has forsaken all of that and has written off being basically either of those things to be heteronormative monogamous with our main character, Sabrina. And this is something I've seen a lot of, is both vilification in that some of the people he was engaged with were antagonist and were seen as the others opposed to Sabrina, as well as that sort of heteronormative monogamous redemption arc, where you start off with a character that's, a floozy or loose and liberal, but by the end, guess what? They've redeemed themselves. They've become a marriageable man or woman dedicated to the one of their dreams. And that kind of erasure really, really gets to me. And on that note, there's also the whole love triangle issue, whether it be in Twilight or Sabrina or any others, that whole I have to pick one. Oh, I have to pick one. When the truth is, we're all adults. We can all communicate about what we want. And if you truly do feel love for two people, guess what? I love both my parents and my brother. There's not a problem with that. I love all of my friends. There's no problem with that. I don't have to pick a favorite or pick just one. And romantic relationships can be exactly the same. You don't have to pick just one. And as long as everyone communicates and works together to solve any issues and jealousies that arise, and they will, then there's no problem with dating 2 or more people at once. You can have that werewolf and that vampire dick at the same time as long as everyone's okay with it. I would drop my microphone after that, but it's kind of expensive, so I'm going to just turn it off.
Fair enough. I think to comment on that polyamory, actually, as someone who is monogamous, there is absolutely no problem with like polyamorous relationships in media, and I don't understand why people are still like, oh, why are they dating more than one? Leave them alone.
Listen. If in a relationship, everyone involved has given informed consent, there should be no problems.
Yeah. And, you know, that's just in a real world thing. And to be honest, like, again, as someone who is monogamous and likely will pretty much be monogamous till the day I die, there are people who are polyamorous, and having good representation of polyamory in the media is, among other things, when it comes to queer rep and rep in general, is good. Let them think, like, show it off in a good way, and then people will be happy. Not everyone will watch said media, but ultimately, like, it's there, and it's...
No one's gonna watch everything anyway.
Exactly. Like,
and on a slight point of that, polyamory is often seen more in the LGBTQ plus community as opposed to heteronormative communities and straight communities.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost inherently part of several cultures, including people of color cultures. The only main culture that is truthfully heteronormative is white Christian societies. And I think it's that domination of media from that segmented group that really does sort of stem a lot of the issues we've been talking about and are going to talk about with race and proper representation. And I still haven't seen a good representation of polyamory in media. I've seen good representations of asexuals. I've seen NBs. I've seen most of the LGBTQ. But when we get to that multiple relationship, that's the one I haven't seen yet. And I'm looking forward for hopefully someone to do it right. But I'm not holding out hope.
Yeah, it's whatever, really. Just if someone's out there working on it, then more power to you.
I know there's a book coming out that's going to be a polyamorous relationship that I'm looking forward to reading. But yeah, if you have any recs, leave them in the comments.
Yeah, please. DM us too. We talk about pretty much anything on this chat, and I swear to God, if anyone DMs us, I will post it on the chat immediately, being like, holy shit, someone DM'd us.
Fan interaction? What is this?
Yeah, what the hell? It makes us feel so official as an entertainment company.
Did you just use the term company?
Entertainment. I don't know what it is. I don't know what this is. It's still a brand? A brand, probably?
I refuse to be a part of companies or brand as capitalist schemes.
Okay,
sorry, gotta just
just this friend group. If you DM us, it will make it towards this friend group. Is that better? I don't know. Is that anti-capitalist yet? Just being a friend group?
He's being very quiet. He gave me the microphone.
Oh shit. Okay, I'm
It's not
sorry.
like we're making money off of this anyway.
Not yet. I'd be surprised if we ever do. Oh my god, that's in a whole other tangent. I'm sorry. I think as we are approaching our first hour of recording, let's close off this first umbrella topic by touching on acceptance. It is both good that we as a society and like within the community that we are seeing more rep in general for a lot of things within the community. So there are more lesbian characters, bisexual characters, trans characters, queer characters in general. That is important. Like, that has long been a suppressed thing in media, and the fact that now we are not just having it more, but having genuine reps for all of this is wonderful. That's so great. But I think the flip side of that being is there are still things that we are, I guess, that are still rough about representation. Not all representation is great. sometimes it gets ultimately bastardized, or maybe it's just not even repped in general. So we're in this weird kind of middle ground with at least LGBTQ plus representation, because it's getting better, but it's still bad in some places. So yeah, anyone else want to help me close off this first umbrella section, or?
I just want to make one comment that just because, like, life doesn't always mirror art. Just because you see somebody that, like, let's say a woman that wears plaid and plays roller derby, does not mean she's a lesbian. I've had that assumption made of myself. I am not straight, but I am not a lesbian. And it can make awkward conversations when people just assume that. Don't assume things just because somebody dresses the way your favorite character of a certain representation does.
Mm-hmm. Like, within one of the biggest things I think that the queer community is and should be proud of is communication. Just, we communicate whenever we are uncomfortable or whenever we're trying to establish boundaries. Just talk to each other. And I think that's what's happening nowadays in stories. There's a lot more, or like in stories in general, people are communicating. They're opening up about experiences to as comfortable a degree as they want it to be. And that in turn is giving us amazing rep, be it subtly or upfront. Like we had touched on, Korra and Asami from The Legend of Korra, and we touched on Katie Mitchell from The Mitchells versus the Machines. But there are also other examples out there that is good representation. And
yeah,
I think
I also, before we close off, I also want to say, like, I haven't seen Mitchells versus the Machines yet, but I do think it's really good to have representation of a queer character that's not like part of a relationship as well. Like, it's good to have like relationship representation, but it's also good to acknowledge that sometimes queer people exist outside of relationships as well.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
And having that be a part of their identity without being focused on a love interest is also really good.
Yeah. Like I've said. Yeah. Like I've said this before in a previous episode, I think with Alex, but basically the whole point is queer people are still people and queer characters are still people. There is always more to this character than just who they are interested in, what's or who they were born as and what their goal is. There is a lot of nuance and like characterization that makes each individual character in general amazing. And that's when you boil it down like that, it's really not that hard to nail a queer character. There are certain aspects of queer culture that is important to have presented. However, at the end of the day, if you just have if you just nail queer rep without it being super ham-fisted and without it being so stereotypical, the queer community will be happy. Like we are starved enough of content as it is. But when it's done right, we will appreciate the fuck out of you. So yeah, I think. What do you guys think? Is that a good way to close off this first umbrella topic?
Smooth segue. Insert smooth segue here.
Okay, so our next umbrella topic is racism, and I think being the notable POC in this friend group, I think I want to open up this discussion with an anecdote. Actually, there was a Disney movie that was released some time ago called Raya and the Last Dragon that was supposed to, or at least I'm going off of what I've heard, but it was supposed to have a Filipina main actress or main lead. It was supposed to be set within Southeast, or it was supposed to have a lot of themes, motifs, and imagery relating to Southeast Asian culture. But apparently the main character was supposed to be Filipina, which for me means the world. You don't often see like a clear, prominent focus on one specific, I guess, race of thing. I don't know if race is the right word for it, but like you don't really see a lot of specific ethnicities. Oh my god,
Nationality.
my brain farted. Thanks, Alex. So yeah, you don't really see clear depictions of like different ethnicities, especially when it comes to Southeast Asia. Everyone is kind of familiar with where Indonesia is, where the Philippines is, but when it comes to Southeast Asia, though, like there is still a lot of beauty in said region, and having clear distinctions like that for Raya and the Last Dragon was hugely important. But for whatever reason, and I don't know again if I'm true to the story or not, but they had changed the they had changed the ethnicity of Raya to be just Southeast Asian and no longer strictly Filipina. And I don't know if that was it from the beginning, and I don't know if it was just clear, or I don't know if I was just if I was just hearing things wrong, or if it was or things were communicated to me wrong. But if for whatever reason, like the main character was supposed to be Filipina and she was just generalized as Southeast Asian, I cannot say fuck you enough to the person who made that decision, because it's so important. And really, Filipino culture in general should be explored more. Like, and I don't mean, like, I mean the Filipino culture that not everyone really knows about. When you think of Filipino culture, there's so much to it that a lot of modern media, especially Western media, doesn't understand. And starting with Raya and the Last Dragon was a good stepping stone in that. It maybe shouldn't have been the entire focus, because obviously there is still a lot of Southeast Asian cultures and ethnicities that is worth representing. However, for Filipino, like for us, or like for us in general, representation is needed. And in a white heteronormative society, you don't really get a lot of that still. So, I guess with said anecdote out of the way, as the first kind of topic into our discussion on racism, let's talk about Black, Indigenous, and person of color leads.
I'm going to bring up the show Invincible again, because it is one of the most recent pieces of media that I have consumed, and I want to say the representation in that in general is very good. The lead is, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he is half Korean, half Viltrumite, which is important to the story. It is his father's race, and I may just be misremembering that. Very well done. It doesn't show his heritage too much, but it is constantly showed in the animation style. He nor his mother are ever too whitewashed. I will say there's still a little bit of it. Side characters done in Invincible are very good as well. The main character's girlfriend is African American. And there is a minor villain named Titan, who is also African American. Now, Titan is the one I wanted to talk about the most in this, in that he is still dropped into a sort of stereotype. And this stereotype isn't necessarily a harmful one, but it's one you'll see in media a lot. And it's that stereotype of the noble thug. And if you don't know what I mean by that, I will explain. It's someone who is caught up in gang and criminal affairs to support or to fix a problem that they have. In the case of Titan, it is his family and the fact that he is in debt to some crime lord or other and is working off said debt. That is the noble thug archetype, basically, in a nutshell. I think it's done stereotypically, but that doesn't mean it's not done well. And there's a twist at the end of the episode, mainly featuring him and his little story there. And I'm going to spoil this, so turn away if you haven't watched Invincible or care. But what's really important is that the episode is entirely him and showing his intelligence, which is something that's not often shown, in that the entire episode is a trick by him to dethrone and take over the crime lord's empire, to start making the inner city, they never name the city, and to start taking the lower classes and improving life in the inner city. So he has taken over this crime lord's business to better the lives of everyone, is given his reason. And I think that little bit of twist at the end really elevated it above the normal archetype where the person usually escapes the gang culture and, you know, lives in white suburbia instead, because apparently that's the goal for everyone. But instead, he's actually shown as a very intelligent character who's going back to do even more work for the people around him. And I think that was a beautiful example, even if he wasn't a lead character, just a wonderfully made side character, in my opinion.
All right, another reason to invest in Invincible, I guess, is a thing. Yeah, I've been hearing so many good things about Invincible, from like its plot, its I guess its ending particularly, but again, no spoilers. Just it really seems to be doing a lot of things well, which is always really good to hear. And I think especially like for BIPOC leads, that is good. That this kind of representation is there and is being done well, Tyler. So thanks for bringing it up. There's one that I definitely wanted to touch on because it is part of one of the most notable franchises in entertainment right now, and that is Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I guess I'm gonna need I'd like to hear the input of everyone who has seen it. Basically, Falcon and the Winter Soldier focuses on Falcon, Sam Wilson. I don't want to get too into the plot of it, because really the plot, I think, is not what everyone keeps talking about when it comes to this show. It is the finale. Or like the finale, it is the end result of all of this character being like all of this characterization and work for Sam Wilson. And there is, I think, the more important thing that people touch on, and that is the racial overtones and themes throughout this series. It's, I think, as like I can't speak for the Black community for this piece, but I can speak from the perspective of someone who is POC. This kind of representation is hella amazing. Like from how, like just how real everything feels whenever they do, or whenever they touch on these racial, like whenever they touch on these racial messages and themes. I think especially in episode 2, which, to avoid spoilers, if everyone kind of knows where I'm getting at in episode 2, holy shit, that is when things get very real very fast. It through characters such as everyone has seen Falcon and the Winter Soldier, right? Here?
Yeah, I've seen it.
No.
Okay.
No.
So I'll try not spoil it, but
Spoil it.
Go for it. I've seen a lot of spoilers on Tumblr already.
Okay. All right. Just thought I would check in. But yeah, through Isaiah Bradley and through like a lot, it's kind of hard to contain my thoughts. So I'm going to have I'm going to have everyone else here try to expand on that for me. But just, it's one of, I think, the most, I don't want to say realistic, but it's one of the most raw depictions of the struggles of not just I think the Black community overall, but just like when it comes to oppressors and oppression, really, which is what a lot of BIPOC face in the real world and in media. So yeah, I'll get the expansion from everybody else.
I thought they did a really good job of showing the nuance with Isaiah, and I feel like, you know, and a lot of times in like superhero kind of media, there's a tendency to show that the hero is the one who's right a lot. And I feel like they didn't do that in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Like, Isaiah's experiences were never, like, dismissed or, like, you know, oh, he was just an exception. They were taken seriously. And Sam, like, took them into consideration. And they, like, his experiences, Isaiah's experiences really affected Sam throughout the plot and the way he thought about things and his decision in the end about whether or not to take up the mantle of Captain America. And I think that was, like, it was just really well nuanced and thought out. And I was pleasantly surprised by how nuanced it was. I wasn't expecting that much from a Marvel show.
Yeah, really, I wasn't so either. Like, I think come episode 2 when, I guess, again, spoilers but when Sam and Bucky are confronted by the police in the street after visiting Isaiah Bradley, that, I think, in the midst of everything that was going on too, like that, like this is a post thing. This is a post like Black Lives Matter protest show. So in the wake of that, so many more people are aware of not just the protests, obviously, but just more things that maybe had been hidden for so long, and no one really can excuse that kind of what am I trying to say? Like, it's, when I say no one can really excuse it, you can't really touch on these tones without seriousness. Like, for so long these kinds of things, so getting pulled over is something that is it's been waved off before, but in a post Black Lives Matter protest society, and I say post lightly, like it is still being protested, it's you can't ignorantly look away from that anymore. You can't just wave that off and say that, and say that this doesn't have a lot of gravity or this doesn't have a lot of weight to it, because when I saw when that episode aired, there was so much discourse on the episode and just how real the show was getting. Like Alex said, for a Marvel show, the fact that they were touching on this was incredible. Truly, and I say incredible in two different meanings. The fact that they were even doing it at all, and the fact that they were handling it with such seriousness and care. From that, like, you would expect from Marvel that, it's campy superheroes and shit, but this, I think the direction that they went in with Falcon with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier was great. It really was incredible.
Yeah, I was talking with a friend earlier about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and because she's just started watching it, and like, I remember that show is interesting because I remember when it first started out, like, there was that whole thing where, like, the fuck, I can't remember his name, but the military guy who Sam is friends with, he's talking about how the Flag Smashers are like they want a world without borders. And I remember in that first episode, I was like, these are the bad guys? These are supposed to be the villains. Marvel, what's up here? Are you got the Pentagon holding a gun to your head behind this camera? What's going on here, bud?
Yeah.
But then as the show went on, like, I was like, oh no, it's intentional. They get it. They knew what they were fucking doing, and like that was the idea. And I thought that was like, because I talked about this a bit in the Marvel episode that we did when we ranked the Marvel episodes. Because I remember I talked about how, like, I think a big problem I have with Marvel villains is how, like, they want to give them like a relatable motivation, but they keep like making it too relatable. So yeah, I thought it was cool how, like, they started out with that, and then they like carried it into the issues of racism in America, and like how that affects Sam, and like how Sam comes to like a different perspective on the characters as a result of like what he's learning about through Isaiah and like his experiences and stuff as a black man in America.
Mm-hmm. Brooke, anything to add?
I saw a lot of people talking about how they were uncomfortable with the themes being shown in the show, and it's like, yeah, babe, that's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
It's not supposed to make you feel comfortable. This is in your face. It's trying to get the message out there. Like, those people who are saying they're uncomfortable are the ones who are like denying the relevance in our real life about these incidents happening. They're like, that doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. And they'll always try and like brush it off in media, being like, oh, they're just being dramatic about it, or they're just trying to over exaggerate a point. And it's like, I want you to be uncomfortable when you're watching these things because it's making your eyes open.
Right. Yeah. To touch on 2 points and to kind of add on to what Brooke was saying, to go in 2 points actually. I had mentioned this before, I think in a previous episode, but one of my favorite creators on TikTok, by the name of Straw Hat Goofy, he was touching on these themes and messages in his analysis of every episode of Falcon the Winter Soldier as it was airing. And I think come episode 2 and onwards, it was disgusting how many people in the comments were gaslighting him, saying that it wasn't so serious and you shouldn't be taken so seriously, when like it was meant to be taken seriously and it should be taken seriously, and like Marvel in general was taking it seriously. And I think to go off on another thing too, just handling this kind of realism is, I think, what makes Marvel more complex than a lot of people like to think. Because when they talk about like how Marvel is, you know, campy sometimes, and it often goes into a lot of, you know, it goes into space a lot, and like things are so loud and visually while visually stunning is still visually like all over the place, they know what they are doing, especially when it came into the more grounded things. WandaVision, by contrast, had the mystical power, like had Wanda's mysticism and magic to kind of go into a completely different direction. Loki, by contrast, has has Loki as a character and the TVA as that kind of arc, so they can explore themes in that way. All Falcon the Winter Soldier had was the world, and the world is fucked up. And how they handled that kind of like fucked upness, I guess, was really well done, especially when they were exploring the fact that like a black man is going to be Captain America, and come the end of the series, a black man is Captain America, which is amazing, not just for the fact of not just for the fact that it like gives, you know, character wise, it just gives Sam more of an emphasis, but for representation and having a black man represent America, that's great.
I haven't seen The Falcon and the Winter Soldier because I've refused to watch any superhero content, basically, besides like Invincible and The Boys. Not necessarily for other reasons. However, in bringing up the fact that Captain America is now a black man, I wanted to talk about a problematic depiction that I've come across recently, if we don't mind segueing.
Let's go.
I recently finished reading Dune, science fantasy beginning of the Dune series by Frank Herbert. I see why a lot of people like it. Personally, I'm not going to read any more in the series, and it's never going to get a reread from me. And I realize it's an older book, but that doesn't excuse this one glaring problematic depiction that I have. And that is the white savior trope. And you see it a lot. And Dune specifically, even though we are not on Earth, and it's hard to depict anyone as, you know, using Earth races in a science fiction novel. It is quite clearly stated in descriptions of the character that our main character, Paul Atreides, comes to a desert planet filled with people of color and becomes their messiah and savior. And I really, really dislike this trope because you see it all the time. And what's especially fucked up about this trope is when you see real life examples of it. And I don't know who here is a serial killer buff, but Charles Manson, through too many LSD trips, when listening to the Beatles, believed that there would be a great race war and that the African American population needed to rise up against their racist overlords and would overthrow the government. And what he believed his role in all of this was he and his little commune were, well, after the African Americans rose up, he believed that they wouldn't know how to run a government and they wouldn't know how to succeed as a country and a culture. And his commune's role in this was to teach and lead them. And when this race war wasn't happening enough, that's when he started with the killings and all those fun things that he did on the side. But initially, his whole idea was that he was going to be the white savior trope. And when we see that as the motivation for a fucking cult serial killer, and it's used in media all over the place, I think we really need to re-examine this, everybody. You need to stop using Charles Manson's logic to tell fucking stories.
Yeah. It's almost like serial killers are bad. Remember that.
Whoa, what? Serial killers are bad? Should we cancel Charles Manson, you guys? I think he's a little bit problematic.
Yeah. Just... What else is there?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit.
That's an interesting trope to bring up too, because it is like super, super, super prevalent. But I think like there's like a reason for that. Just based on how our society is in general, I feel like that's a lot of things that a lot of people, or that's something that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily see as inherently problematic right off the bat, because I feel like a lot of our society, like, and our history, like the history of Canada is basically that.
Mm-hmm.
Like colonialism and stuff.
Who else is up to boycott Canada today with me this year?
Yeah, always.
Always. I would celebrate it anyway.
Let's do it.
I have a question, actually. It just popped into my head while Tyler was talking about the whole white savior thing. Would it be all right if someone did like a kind of reversal of the trope? I mean, like not in like the actual sense of reversal. I mean, like, say you still have that exact same idea of like a white person showing up in a community of black people and they've never seen a white person before and they're like, oh, what is this? And they start hailing this person as a god. But the white person never actually acts like a god and they're actually always saved by everyone else.
El Dorado.
Oh, you know what?
I mean, you're not wrong.
Breathe. Brooke, breathe.
Oh my god, please, Brooke.
Oh, that threw me. Perfect. Thank you, Gabe.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Oh my god.
To try and answer your question though, I think there's a way to like do tropes like that and like play with them, but it has to be like carefully done. You know, it's the same thing as like satire. You know, if you don't do it right, you could just be playing into the problems that you want to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Or contributing to the problems you're trying to criticize is a better way of saying that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This actually reminds me of a book series that I read. There are two books. I don't know if you consider it a series. Trickster's Choice and Trickster's Queen by Tamora Pierce. And I love her books. But she herself has acknowledged problematic actions she's taken while writing. and one of them with this book series that she's trying to correct because she's still writing in that same universe. And in this series, it takes place on the Copper Isles, which were colonized, and the natives were forced into slavery by the white colonizers. And there was a prophecy made that says, in the time of the fear, the one who I promised will come to the Raqqa bearing glory in her train and justice in her hand, blah, blah, blah. It references a person born to two lines of royals, both the white royals and the native Raqqa royal family. And the white savior trope comes in when you meet Allie, who is from a different country. She's a white girl, and she's brought in by the god to be the rebels, the Raqqa's spy master. Mm-hmm. And while she is not the one who saves everybody, she plays a pivotal role in the rebellion, and basically, like, she's their spy master. She's the one that gets the information and creates all of that. And then she becomes, like, after the twice royal becomes queen, she has her as the country spy master. However, she's the daughter of the spy master and the champion of the king of another country. So there's a whole idea of this foreign girl coming in and having this position of power in a different country.
Right.
And the author has recognized this, and later on says that she gave her position to a person she trained from that and went back to her home country. Although that's also kind of problematic as well. But yeah, it's weird when you think of it that way.
Yeah. I think to touch on another really, really dumb example of the white savior trope, kind of just really stupidly, basically it is through movies like The Great Wall that just need to stop. I fucking hate that movie so much. And I don't know if I've ever been like, I don't know if I've ever expressed my hatred for The Great Wall lately, but just, I guess now because we are touching on the white savior complex, that's literally what the fucking movie is. It's Matt Damon just somehow miraculously saving China from alien dogs. Like, what the fuck?
Totally forgot about that movie even existing until this exact moment.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
yeah, sorry guys. I'm like, it's definitely the most upfront with it, and it's really those movies that just need to outright fucking stop being into production, because on top of the white savior complex being really egregious and stupid, it's like just my issues with this movie go so severe, and I don't want to get too lost in it, but basically just you had the general's daughter at some point. Couldn't she just have saved all of China and have like an empowering, like have like a great like female led movie rather than just some random white guy saving the thing? Just it doesn't add up to me, really.
It's the culture of colonialism that we live in.
Oh god. Yeah. So that's another letter to Hollywood. Stop fucking making those movies.
Please.
It says here on the list, actually, that under racism that I want to touch on tokenism. However, I think we had been touching on tokenism already. Instead, what I want to focus on for a little bit is actually whitewashing. And whitewashing is it's something that I'm only just now really starting to come to terms with as someone who is really unfamiliar with his own culture, and to a degree that, like, for years I had been saying that because of that it's almost like I have been completely whitewashed, and that I think isn't great. And I say that very lightly, like it's really not amazing, because there is, obviously when you have such beautiful and amazing cultures and ethnicities around the world that a lot of people are just now starting to come to terms with and embrace, having whitewashed characters in place of this ethnicity, in place of these beautiful ethnicities, just don't do that anymore. Let embrace the cultures of these characters. I know it can be hard to write as a race that you're not, but that's why you talk to people. And I think whitewashing has always come from, or at least to my understanding, how I've approached it as a creative writer, having whitewashed characters just means that you don't really want to put the research in. You don't really want to embrace any of the amazingness that comes with different cultures and ethnicities. And really, it's just depriving these cultures from having a platform, I think. Does that make any sense? Is that good? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I always like to double check. I never know when I'm going off or something, but
I know that feeling.
yeah, let's touch on whitewashing, guys.
Yeah.
Go off, Tatiana. Yeah, whitewashing examples. Anyone seen the new Ghost in the Shell?
Oh God.
On Netflix?
Considered new.
Is it new? It came out what?
Oh, the one's the Scarlett Johansson one. Yeah, fuck, I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
I don't know what new is, everyone, so you'll have to excuse me. My rock spans all time and ages, so I don't know. But yes, that was one of the most egregious examples I could think of in recent memory. And again, nothing against the actress per se, but I do think that especially in film and visual representations, as an actor, which is considered an art form, you do have a duty to uphold, per se. And as such, I think if you know you're going to be playing a role that was from another culture or race, and you are not of that said culture or race, you should probably take a real big step back. And I think and you were talking about this, Dean, in that you just aren't willing to do the research. And yeah, I think a lot of this stems from ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a AAA actress who is making millions per movie off your name and appearance alone, you have the time to do the research necessary in any piece that you are a part of. You're not worried about rent. You're not worried about making any deadlines. You are rich and famous beyond belief. At least take a very little bit of time and realize that maybe some roles weren't meant for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can always turn it down. You can always.
That being said, I'm kind of going to play the devil's advocate on this and point with voice actors. I've seen people criticize voice actors for voicing people of color when they are white. When the actor comes out and says hey, I auditioned for it. They didn't have the artwork finalized, and I had already signed the contract and couldn't back out by the time the artwork was finalized. In certain scenarios, they kind of get back into a corner.
Yeah.
And it's not the actor's fault, but the casting director's fault on that.
Yeah, there's got to be a certain point where we also hold the people, it's the actors aren't really in charge of things. You can say that an actor should know better than to play a role that they can't represent because they're the wrong race or whatever other reason, when that opportunity could go to someone that would be able to do that, who wouldn't otherwise get that opportunity. But also, this isn't just an actor problem. This is, there's a lot of people involved in making media, and we need to hold all of them responsible for that kind of stuff at every level of production, directors and screenwriters and producers, and at a certain point, it's not the actor's responsibility, I think.
Yeah, it's like not everyone, I think, should be blaming the actor. Like certainly there could be like a certain level of scrutiny if the actor themselves is like just it's a role, it doesn't matter. Like yes, it does matter. It matters a lot more than you think. But like Alex is right, and like Marie-Soleil is also right. Like sometimes there are just situations that the actor themselves can't really avoid, and it's because of that everyone else should be held like responsible for that. It was up to a higher up that made this decision in the first place.
Yeah, it's something that like there's a lot of people. It's something that everyone should be conscious of in the production of something.
Yeah. Gabe, you were gonna
I don't disagree, but Gabe, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I do agree with that. I think in the case of Scarlett Johansson, it does apply because she's like very openly said that like she doesn't see the problem with her playing that role. On a broader term for the industry, I think I see what you mean. Also,
that's fair because she did not handle the criticism well, and then she also auditioned to play a trans man in a movie
by the same director, no less.
Oh my god! Yeah. Oh my god!
So she didn't learn her lesson.
No. I will also say that movie is like it is like all around kind of fun. It's not just Scarlett Johansson. Like one thing that I noticed with that movie is that characters become more Japanese the less important they are in the story. Like the main character is white, and then the main villain is white, and like the main like supporting character is white, and then like as like you go down the list, it's like they get more Asian, and it's very disconcerting element of that movie.
Why did they even make that movie? Like the original one is there, just watch it. Why do we have to make white versions of foreign movies?
I have no idea.
I also heard that like there's graffiti in one scene on the walls that's actually like someone's shopping list. Someone translated it, and it's just like a list of groceries or something.
Oh my god.
What do you mean? I'd throw that up all the time.
Like if it had just been a thing, like the thing is, if the West wanted to do like an adaptation of Ghost in the Shell, okay, why then did you decide to cast a white person to play a Japanese actress?
What's fucked up
or a
is
Japanese
that
character
in the story too. It's like the story even like takes it to a next level of like fucking beyond fucked up, where her character is like originally a Japanese woman who gets fucking I can't remember the exact context, but like she gets her brain put into this body, and the body is like the white body of Scarlett Johansson. She's like, it's what? Like in the canon of the Scarlett Johansson Ghost in the Shell movie, she's literally canonically whitewashed. It's
oh my god!
He meets her with her Japanese mom at the end.
She does, yeah. She meets the Japanese mom.
That's kind of. I've heard people actually defending that, saying like it's okay to have Scarlett be the actress for it because the whole point of ghosts is that they're just shells, and you can make the shell whatever you want it to look like. So they're like, oh, maybe they did this for a purpose, that she's supposed to be a white woman.
But what kind of Death Note Light Turner bullshit is that?
It's just so hilarious, though.
I mean, like from that perspective, it's also very hilarious that like they have to change the point of the plot of Ghost in the Shell to support their whitewashing of Ghost in the Shell.
God, Hollywood.
Just watch the original. Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
the original is a fucking amazing movie. Just go watch it.
Yeah, either watch the original or actually like properly adapt the source material.
God.
Oh my god. So
yeah. Like
holy
watch
shit.
Ghost in the Shell or watch Standalone Complex. You have so many options that aren't the movie.
Yeah. I think with that I'm gonna try my best to segue here. So we're talking about like we had been touching on movies quite frequently when we were talking about whitewashing, and I think movies, while not the only type of media that does this, it's certainly one of the biggest ones because of its potential to reach more audiences. Like, I don't want to say books and video games are completely niche stories, but however, movies are 2.5 hours. It's not super hard to get invested into a movie. However, because of our final topic, it's also where it's also with movies that a lot of things tend to be performative. And to help kind of close out this umbrella topic, we're now going to touch on performative representation, which I think the most latest example that I really wanted to talk about was Warner Brothers somehow recasting Superman, specifically Kal-El Superman, as they're deciding to recast Kal-El, a traditionally white character, into a now black superhero, into now black Kal-El, which what? Yeah, I don't know if you have you guys heard about that?
No.
Yeah. So lately, because of it's surrounding a lot of drama with Warner Brothers and DC in general, but that was, I think, one of the latest things to kind of come out of it. So because of a lot of people are kind of just assuming, and probably rightfully assuming, that this change is performative, just to make sure that like Warner Brothers is inclusive and, you know, representing black voices and, you know, showing off black characters. However, recasting Kal-El specifically as Superman when there are a whole bunch of other black Supermen and super people, I guess, in general, that could do that is wild, to say the absolute bare minimum. It was specifically Kal-El that they decided to recast when everyone didn't take that lightly. Like,
Yeah.
You can imagine with a whole, with a multiverse of different characters, especially in the wake of one of your characters, Cyborg, getting completely mistreated in previous adaptations in Justice League. Like, what the fuck are you doing, Warner Bros?
Making up for that, obviously.
Making up for it. Yeah, they're trying.
Trying to.
Yeah.
My computer was frozen for a sec there, so I don't know if you touched on this, but I remember seeing the news about the Kal-El casting thing, and it was very weird. So it was like if they had found a black actor and they were he had auditioned and they were like, oh, this actor played Kal-El really fucking well. Let's cast him as Kal-El. Fuck say fuck it to whatever the thing is, to the fact that Kal-El's white. It doesn't matter. This is a great actor and he could play the role really well. But what was weird was that it was it was like a mandate. They were it felt like they had, the goal wasn't to cast, it was like they wanted to fill a role. They wanted to it was almost like a they wanted to take a box almost. It was very weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can't really. Sorry, Brooke, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I've had this issue for years. I don't like thinking about it, but many years ago, I got into an argument on an Instagram comment section about someone redrawing Diana, Wonder Woman, as black. At the time, I didn't know how to express my feelings about it correctly, so I came off as very racist, which I don't like thinking about that now. But what I meant to say when I was younger was I didn't like people changing white characters into black characters just to fill that void. It's one thing to hand down the mantle, handing down the mantle of Wonder Woman to a black girl, fine, that's whatever. But changing Diana herself, nah. Same thing with Kal-El. I've actually heard Asian people claim Kal-El as more their representation because he sounds somewhat Asian. He's coming from a foreign land or something like that. I think it was, I went to a seminar with a comic creator, and he was Chinese, and he was talking about that specifically. And I've never thought about it that way before. And I was like, oh, that's really nice that they were able to see themselves in Superman, who had always been portrayed as white. So my problem with the black Superman is that it's not just the mantle of Superman being handed on to a new diverse character. It's changing the character themselves.
Yeah. Like, I said this already, but it really does bear repeating. There are other black super people that DC has at their disposal, and they specifically choose Kal-El as Black Superman. Which why?
Just so we know why. It's for the diversity bucks, because Warner Bros. Doesn't do their research, and this once again kind of goes down to ignorance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, they weren't willing to do the research on the DC comics to find a black super that they wanted to portray. They weren't. They just wanted to check a box, and I think that's the best description of it. Interesting that we bring up Superman. I have a good example of a sort of POC Superman. DC comic run does have an animated feature to it called Gods and Monsters. Very good. If you haven't read the comics or watched, I suggest watching. It's a very good film. They do this a few times in the DC universe where they decide to take the Justice League and change something integral about it to change the way it works in that little corner of the multiverse. Superman specifically in this one is actually the genetic offspring of General Zod, as opposed to his actual father, Kal-El is. Also, he doesn't land in Smallville. He lands, I believe it was somewhere in New Mexico or something like that, and ends up getting picked up by a couple who are illegal immigrants to the United States from Mexico. And it gives him an entire different perspective on how the West treats its people, and really changes his values as Superman, and was a very great and inclusive way to change up a well-known character in a different section of the multiverse. Now, he still looked kind of like Superman, still had the same general facial structure and skin tone, but showing that different perspective is what's important in my mind. So if they have a Superman who is, say, black or of any color, that's just changing his skin tone. It's not changing the culture that makes the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that all track?
More or less, yeah. Like, it's likely the reason why it feel like it you know, we're talking about this in terms of like being a performative representation. Like, changing your character or changing the race of your character ultimately changes that character completely. It's the same when you look at, or I guess it's the same. Like, I say, like, if you were to change a black character into a white character, people would be in uproar. And likewise, when you're changing, like, Kal-El specifically, who was traditionally a white character, embodies Superman as Kal-El, that is ultimately going to change when you change him into, I guess, a black character. That problem has been mitigated by DC and other writers creating other black super people who, in their own way, still embody the message behind Superman, but they also have their own unique struggles. That, I think, is likely what's pissing everybody off, because Kal-El, in his own way, while has always been traditionally white, is still his own character. And if you suddenly change the fact that he is now just a black character, like, it's in a warped way that, like, Warner Brothers is like, you know, ticking a box or something. But for everyone else who is grown up with Superman, or specifically with Kal-El Superman, that is just a change that hasn't gone well. I think. Like, it's changing the heart of your character, like the core of your character that is never good in the first place. And it's actually, to what Brooke was saying earlier, passing the mantle down is a great idea. If they wanted to have a black Superman, they could have Kal-El pass the mantle down to someone else.
I
Just like Captain America.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, that's what Captain America, Falcon and the Winter Soldier was doing.
Fucking Spider-Man.
Marvel with Spider-Man, instead of turning Peter Parker black, they brought in Miles, who was already like a known comic book character.
Yeah.
Like,
Spider-Verse.
yeah, like no one had an issue with a black Spider-Man because it's Miles Morales. He is his own character. He is his own, like, he has his own story. He has his own experiences and struggles. It's what makes him an integral, like, it's what makes Miles Morales integrally Miles Morales. If you had just changed Peter Parker into a black character, that would ultimately change Peter Parker, who, for many who have grown up with white Peter Parker, they saw themselves in what Peter Parker was. Changing that race ultimately just, I guess it just changes how people would see him. And it's really changing how a lot of people are seeing Superman. It's definitely changed how people are seeing Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
So I think to kind of help close off performative representation, if you want to,
I actually wanted to talk about this book that I read at one point.
Oh, sorry.
If that's
go ahead.
all right.
Yep, go ahead. Sorry.
Cool. So the book is called Wildfire, and it's by Karsten Knight, and it's about teenagers who are reborn gods. So our main character, her name is Ashlyn. She's the reincarnation of, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Pele, a volcano goddess. And it brings up the fact that she's not white at every possible opportunity it can. And in the main cast of characters are very diverse because they are gods from different cultures and different backgrounds that somehow all ended up at a boarding school in the middle of nowhere, the United States. And like just there's an I don't have the book with me, but an excerpt on the publisher's website has her confronting her cheating boyfriend and the girl he cheated on her with. And it literally says, like, the girl's like, "Quite Christ wild, didn't your parents teach you any manners?" And then, "Oh, right, you're just some crazy bush child that your parents came home from vacation with." Ash raised her hand and touched the skin over her cheek, at once painfully self-conscious of how her skin, the hue of earth and clay, clashed against the backdrop of her predominantly white school. She spent the better part of each day feeling like a grizzly in the polar bear cage, and now Lizzie Jacobs was poking her with a stick through the bars. The crowd had fallen uncomfortably quiet as well. Like,
yikes.
Wow.
And they talk about her like being a bubbling cauldron of rage, and over because she's this volcano goddess, right? So of course she's gonna have a temper and everything. But it just feels like when I read it as a 16-year-old, I didn't notice this, but like reading it more recently, it's like this just feels problematic to me.
Yeah.
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 Oh yeah.
But they also have the reincarnation of like Baldur, a Norse god, and he sacrifices himself to save her, and like that also felt like white savior because he's one of the only white reborn gods that is at her school, jumping in front of a spear to save her from a really weird chick. And it's just like,
oh wow,
could have written this so much differently and still kept the representation, still kept in the diverse characters without making it so blatant, like her and her sister or Polyasian, adopted by a white middle class family in the suburbs.
Mm-hmm. Oh my, wow.
Yeah.
Yike. Okay. Holy shit.
That's an author that wants you to know that the main character's not white because they want brownie points.
Yeah. Which, hey, for any creative writers and or creatives out there in general who are considering doing things for the sake of brownie points, fucking stop.
Please stop.
Just be authentic, like be true and be authentic for your character's sake. Like if you don't know how to write if you are a white person who doesn't know how to write a black character, just ask and do research. Don't assume. Seriously, don't just write in. Don't be performative, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Don't just include these characters without having any kind of prior research or any kind of experience from either yourself or from someone else, because we don't live in a world where you can be ignorant anymore. Or we live in a world where you cannot be ignorant anymore.
You're going to get called out on it.
Yeah. I think we as... I guess just in general, we as a friend group and we as a society are embracing these stories a lot more, and that means changing a lot of what was previously known about race and about our sexualities, and specifically about our gender roles, which leads us into our next umbrella topic, which is addressing sexism and the binary in general. Our first talking point on this is female-led stories, and as a man, I don't want to talk over the women or the female presenting people in this chat, so I'll let them take it from here.
Good job, Dean. Put him on the spot. What have you done?
God.
So freaking out.
I mean, I could talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer if we want.
Go ahead. Yeah.
That's a good jumping off point.
So, I can talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and this 16-year-old girl in high school, her parents have just separated, is now thrust with the responsibility to save the world from the demons of hell. Or I should say, she's 15 when the TV series starts, because on her 16th birthday, she has sex with her boyfriend, who's an immortal vampire, and he loses his soul.
God. It's been a while since I watched it. I think Buffy is... I enjoyed Buffy when I watched it, but it's definitely one of those shows that's not aged super well in terms of its female-led... It's kind of I almost want to... Not proto-feminist is not the right word, but it's it's trying to be a strong female character. And for the time, I think it was. But as we've progressed with our feminism and stuff, it's kind of fallen. It's not held up as well as it could have.
Yeah. There's a council of watchers that are supposed to guide the Slayers and help teach them and everything. They're all men. Slayers are always female. And, most of them die a very harsh death, killed by a vampire or demon of some sort.
I also think that Buffy is kind of one of the forefront examples, or the leaders of the strong female character trope that is very prevalent right now, especially in a lot of YA literature for girls.
Yeah.
Not to throw shade at anyone in particular, but
Oh, now you're holding back?
do you want me to cough, Sarah J. Maas, cough? Like
I don't know why you're suddenly holding back now.
listen. But yeah, Buffy is definitely an example of that. Aelin is another example of that. Of this, like, they're like very feminine presenting. You know, they have long hair. They're beautiful. They like wearing dresses and like dressing up and putting on makeup and stuff. But also, they fight good, which is very important.
Buffy tries out for the cheerleading team. She runs for May Queen or prom queen. When she's fighting with a group of army thugs, she still wants to wear her like halter tops and stuff instead of actual like proper equipment and shirts that aren't gonna like rip and show off cleavage.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're fighting, girl. Put on some armor.
Yeah, I think Alex had touched on this in a previous episode, but basically what they had insinuated was that when it comes to female-led characters, they may differ from what heteronormativity and like the roles that, you know, men and women kind of fall into to a degree, but ultimately, regardless of however much progress has been made, they still fall into what is traditionally a woman, what is traditionally a man. So like, I think in that Alex had probably, or when Alex had first brought it up, they were probably assumed, like they had brought up the case of Aelin, who was this badass assassin fighter, but somehow still like a musician who likes to wear dresses and
Musician?
They play the piano.
Yeah.
I don't remember that. Okay.
Loving food. Absolutely gorging on food whenever possible.
Yeah, but no, Aelin's a good example of that because, like, on the surface, she's like a badass assassin, but she's not allowed to break out of the box of being a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, and you know, and like again, you can have nuanced characters, but it's when that trope becomes very reoccurring, as it is right now, in my opinion. And it's very common. That's when it starts to become like it feels performative. Like, you know, she's badass on the surface, but in the end, she's just another Mary Sue.
Mm-hmm.
And like thinking about Buffy, I'm just thinking about how like a lot of the stuff that she deals with, a lot of the trauma she goes through, doesn't like. There is stuff that happens to her that also happens to other characters, and it's more focused on the other characters. Like in the later seasons, she's nearly, trigger warning for sexual assault. She's nearly sexually assaulted by an ally of hers, and instead of focusing on the trauma that puts on her, it focuses on how he reacts to this, how he looks at those actions and feels horrified for it and goes off on a journey because he's a vampire. He goes off to get his soul back so he won't do anything like that again. Instead of focusing on like how it impacted Buffy, how being attacked by this person she trusted, it focuses on his reaction to it.
Yeah, that scene was so bad. I don't know why they included that.
And then also Xander walking in on that and then just going off to try to fight the Spike, who's the attacker. And instead of trying to help Buffy, who is obviously in pain, he's automatically got to be the manly man and go take out the attacker.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Brooke, were there any?
Well, that's fun.
Yeah, Brooke, were there any ones that you want to touch on in terms of like female-led stories?
Excuse me. When I mentioned Aelin eating, I actually even totally forgot about that. But I do want to say that that is one thing I really liked, actually, is seeing a woman being able to just eat in a story. Because I feel like a lot of the time representation, they don't eat a lot, or like especially when they're like stressed or angry, they like don't eat at all. They're like, oh, I just can't eat in this state. But she's just always fucking eating. She's gorging herself. I'm like, yeah, plus I too really love heaping spoonfuls of brown sugar on my oatmeal when I am depressed. Good. Chocolate cake? Hell yeah. Shove it in my face. Good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If we wanna talk about like women eating in books, since I just finished rereading Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, Nina's a character that eats a lot, and she's like obsessed with food, and she's allowed to be that way. And it's very much pointed out when she's not eating, it's because she's struggling with like addiction and like a bunch of other stuff. And it's like everyone's concerned about her when she doesn't eat, which is, you know, a nice change.
It's also just great that she's like described as like a larger woman who loves to eat, but she's still the sexy one.
She's
As
great.
she should be.
And also still super powerful and sassy and intelligent and just like well-rounded.
She's a good. All the characters in that book are good, but like, yeah, I love Nina.
Mm-hmm. I think if we're still touching on the Grishaverse in general, I think let's quickly touch on Alina, who, in my opinion, is both a good example and kind of a bad example of a female-led story. And I'll start off with what I think the bad example is first, and that is the fact that she is like, how do I say this? She isn't appreciating like her beauty, I think, which is a very common thing, or which has been like a very common trope, I think, in early YA, especially when it was a female-led story.
There's this whole thing where the main like female character isn't allowed to know that she's beautiful, because if she does, then she's seen as vain, which is a negative character trait. Because, you know...
Yeah, but I feel like in this case, it was for the purpose of like the whole, she was a Grisha, but she was hiding it. So she looked awful all those years because she didn't get to use her powers. But she does start seeing her beauty a little bit when she actually finally does start using it, and her physical appearance changes.
Yeah, I think that's like one of those tropes that I feel like Leigh Bardugo did play with a little bit, but it's still an irritating trope. The big one for me, rereading the books, was this is another really common trope in like female-led YA books, is they always hate other women so much.
Yeah.
And like you know, with I don't think you've finished reading these books yet, Dean, so I don't want to get like too spoilery into it, but like the way Alina treats like Zoya especially, and any other woman that has the possibility of catching Mal's eye, she just like she gets so mad at them, and like in the first book she goes off about how annoying Maria and Nadia are, and she just hates being around other women, and I think that's a really common trope that I really hate in YA, or it's just like, can't listen, girls can be friends with other girls, let them be friends.
I'm not like other girls trope.
It's the not like other girls trope, and it's also the heteronormativity. It's also the heteronormativity, because it's always like girls fighting over guys. So you know, Alina has a good relationship with Genya, because Genya is not a direct competition to any of her love interests. But Zoya is a competition to, I think, all three of her love interests. And so Zoya is viewed as a rival, and therefore they can't really be friends. Again, I do think like towards the end of the series, this is kind of played with a little bit more, and like reading King of Scars and getting Zoya's perspective on stuff, there is more like there's more nuance to it. But reading like the Grisha trilogy again, like that's something that really irritated me.
I think like then like I say that Alina is both a good and bad example of properly representing female-led stories, because in what was the good definitely was more because of the show, I think. Again, I don't want to speak over the women and female presenting in this chat, but basically just they really like not just understood Alina as a character, but fleshed it out more so with her, like, I guess to kind of talk about what Alex had said, and again, feel free to correct me where I'm wrong, but she still very much is Alina. However, she doesn't have that kind of I'm not like other girls kind of energy. I think like she has a good relationship with her friends. Zoya is still very much a competition, but not for the sake of competing with thing, not for the sake of like competing with love interests and whatnot. And just all around, like the show Alina is more, I think, more of a well-rounded female character, not just a heteronormative example, I think, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, she's also a way more active protagonist in the show, and we get to actually see her like make decisions that affect the plot and the story and what happens to her and other people.
Right.
Which I think again adds to like making her an actually interesting and in-depth character, rather than just how she was like in the book. Things just kind of happen to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a good choice on the part of the show, was making her a more active protagonist, which makes her feel like a more rounded out character just in general. And it's nice to have like a female character who's like actively making decisions that change the plot of the show.
Right. Yeah.
I'd rather just talk about something else. Well, something that popped into my head just now was the Shatter Me series. I just realized that I absolutely hate the trope, because we were just talking about like the whole protagonist-led actions and stories. I just realized that a lot of the books that I have read have dealt with chasing men instead of other goals.
Mm-hmm.
And what came into my head was Shatter Me. And like, I know that generally it's considered a romance as one of the genres, at least. But it still bothers me when most of their motivation is about men. Because even, like, the whole thing at the beginning is, like, she just really wants to be with Adam. She wants to get away with Adam.
Right, yeah.
And then when she realizes that Adam doesn't want her to be the powerful person that she is anymore, she goes after Warner. But it's still chasing a man, because Warner is the one who's always encouraging her to be her powerful self and, like, giving her a way to be that powerful person. But it's not really chasing her dreams of being powerful. She's still just chasing connection and companionship in a male.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I think especially when I read just focusing on the first trilogy within Shatter Me, I think like I couldn't really avoid that. Like the second that like I knew what was going on, like how you worded it, like it was so upfront throughout the first 3 books. Like there's a fucking thing, like there's a fucking revolution you like y'all are in, and you focus on the love triangle.
It's all about the fucking love drama. It's like, I would rather learn about all these other people with powers. I don't give a shit about whose dick be popping more. Get out of here.
Exactly. Like I think I talked about, like, I don't know if I talked about this with you actually, Brooke, but like it, like one of the things that I loved about Shatter Me was the fact that like it subverted to a degree a lot of what YA kind of was. Like there was still some kind of underground revolution and like an eventual uprising against like the oppressive government and whatnot, but at the heart of it there were superheroes or like superpowers, which wasn't a thing in the Hunger Games, Divergent, or Maze Runner. Like that is super interesting, or that's a super interesting angle that like Tahara Mafi put in. But then fucking Nope just will briefly go over the powers, show it a little bit, but still love triangle. Fuck.
Yeah. That's why I like Red Queen more, because Red Queen is everything that Shatter Me should have been. It's 1,000 times better, and it still has the whole love triangle dynamic, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But it's just so much more well done. Like, you actually get, why don't I remember her name? Mar? Yeah. You actually get Mar caring about more things than just which brother she wants. It's her family dynamic. She's trying to change the state of the world. She's trying to help herself. She's struggling with her internal desires of like running away and actually joining the fight and coming to terms with who she is, what she needs to be. Red Queen was everything Shadow Me would have been. So good. Love Red Queen so much.
Nice. Guess that's everyone's other recommendation for today. I
will always recommend Red Queen.
Mm-hmm. That's still
I never finished those books.
That's
okay. Still Tahara Mafi, right? Red Queen?
No. Victoria.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we were talking about Shatter Me. I thought it was the same author because I know nothing about Red Queen, so.
No.
It's the super powered thing.
It's literally the same thing again. Well, not quite, because with Shatter Me, it's like Shatter Me starts with her thinking she's like the only person with the superpower, right? And then she finds out there's more. Red Queen is set in a world with people with powers, but they have silver blood. Anyone with powers has silver blood, so the world is divided into reds versus silvers. So the red people are people without powers, but then Mar, the main protagonist, is a red-blooded person who suddenly finds out that she does have powers, and it takes on from there with the reds trying to get equality in the world of the silvers.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still really good, and it's still about revolution and powers.
Mm-hmm.
Female-led.
Yeah.
I have a trope I would like to discuss, speaking of female-led stereotypes, if we don't mind.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Tomboy tropes. And Marie-Soleil just snickered heavily because I think I've spoken about this to her before. And the worst representation trope for female-led that bothers me every time I see it is the whole, oh, she's a tomboy. Look at her doing boys' things. But you know what's the ideal she should strive for? Taking off her glasses, putting on a dress, and finding a man. And this comes in so many fucking stories. Ridiculous amounts. That by the end, it's not the same character. She's changed all beliefs. But look, she's smiling and happy and wearing a dress. This is what you want, isn't it, ladies? This is what you're supposed to be, right? And it's just heavy-handed media cramming.
Also, she's conventionally attractive by the end.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, makeup and everything, and fucking she took her glasses off so she can't see, which is even more desirable in a female companion. Media has told me.
Can't see anything.
Contacts exist.
Contacts.
Yeah, you never see them put them in though. You never see them put contacts in.
That is true.
Wait, there's that show. Was that Frenemies? Frenemies did that. She wears contacts all the time, and then she doesn't have contacts one day, and she wears glasses, and they're all like, ugh. But that's something I've always absolutely hated with the female trope and beautifying, because they all look like me. They have usually curly brown hair and glasses, and they take off the glasses and they straighten the hair and put on makeup, and they're like, now you're gorgeous. So I grew up thinking I would never be gorgeous in my natural state with glasses and curly hair. So fuck those stories, because there's hundreds of them.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I got the ire up. And part of the reason I'm discussing this trope specifically is a wonderful example of it. And this is a wonderful example of, honestly, a lot of good representation. It's a series. There's only 2 books out right now. The 3rd is coming. The first is Gideon the Ninth. The second is Harrow the Ninth.
I've heard of them. They're on my list.
Very good. Oh my fucking god. I cannot recommend this series enough. The author is a female named Tamsin Murr. And the tagline for the first book is, and I know I'm going to get this wrong, but it's something to the gist of lesbian space necromancers explore a haunted gothic castle. And it sounds Yeah,
Sign me
so
up.
it sounds really cliche and like, oh, this is written by a man. He just wants some fetishism. And that's what I thought going into it. It's nothing like that. It's fucking amazing. The main character of the first book, Gideon, she is lesbian. I believe she is POC, and she is very butch presenting. She is very tomboyish, and she holds a big sword. And none of this ever changes. She is her character throughout the whole thing. There's no transition where she's suddenly wearing a dress. There's no transition where she suddenly beautifies up. They try to put makeup on her a few times. It does not go well. And she's contrasted by Harrow, who is more femme presenting and more feminine, but is the feminine side of lesbian. I'm pretty sure no characters are straight in either of these novels, and if they are, they don't get much screen time.
Ideal.
Ideal, very ideal. And that whole the tomboy doesn't change into the beatified princess was so unbelievably refreshing. My goodness. And for female-led stories, I think Tamsin Muir, with this initial foray into the science fantasy genre, is killing it. If you haven't read Gideon the Ninth, fucking do it.
More recommendations. There we go.
Good to know. That's been on my list for like a couple of weeks. Good to know that it's good.
Is it a recent series?
Pretty recent. I believe she's released Gideon in 2018, Harrow in 2019. There we go. With Alecto the Ninth coming out hopefully soon, because her world building is also amazing on top of everything. The second book is a hell of a trip, by the way. The second book is a delve into madness and mental illness on top of everything else, and it is a trip. Both very good. But enough of my recommendations. Yeah, Tomboy to Princess sucks.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things where I think a lot of times there's female characters are expected to, well, there's like, societal beauty standards and like gender roles and all that bullshit. And they're very much upheld by a lot of stories with women as the leads. And so a lot of times they fall into the same tropes where they're expected to look a certain way and act a certain way. And if they don't, then they have to by the end of the story. Right. And it's like women are more complicated than that. Like even like your average like straight cis teenage girl, they're not all the same. And of course, not every girl is gonna be straight or cis, or then of course, there's so much nuance in. People are complicated, and stories should reflect that. And stories about women often don't.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just remembering the Vampire Diaries books, and I got this scene in my head where Elena is breaking up with her boyfriend Matt, and he says, "Oh, I knew this was going to happen," because Stefan has just started at their school, and he's like, "Yeah, there's a shiny new toy for you to go after now." And I was just like, "Ooh, yeah, I'll put out on that," but also, wow.
Wow, indeed. Oh my god.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
There are so many things about the Vampire Diary books and the Vampire Diaries TV shows that I could talk about, and it's like, ugh.
That can be a separate episode.
Yeah, we can totally do an episode on the Vampire Diaries if you guys want to. Yeah. Or on L.J. Smith, the author.
I'm totally down.
So many potential.
And Tyler would even join us on that one.
Yeah, it's so many potential for so much potential for season 5 of this podcast, I think. But, yeah, I think. Do you guys want to transition into the next one, or I guess like the second half of this?
Yeah, I got some words. I always got words, you know that. So
well,
okay.
Sexism. Yeah. A lot of women are subjected to sexism in stories, but they're not the only ones because gender roles go both ways.
The second half of this conversation relating to sexism and the binary is on men. And I think the one that I wanted to at least open with is vulnerability, because men being vulnerable in a heteronormative society, and especially in heteronormative media, boils down to maybe a couple things. Either it's physical or the love interest is affected. Which, no, it's more than that. Like, it really is more than that. It's so much more than that. And I say that because vulnerability doesn't just extend, obviously, to any physical damage you take in. So it also doesn't just extend to your love interests thing. Like, it doesn't just express, like, you know, opening up to your love interests and whatnot. That's a pretty common scenario that happens. But vulnerability, being vulnerable as a man in general, is difficult in media and in society and in media, because pretty much we're told not to be vulnerable. We're expected to be strong by every sense of the word, mental, physical, psychologically strong. We're not allowed, and we're not accepted if we are showing weakness in any kind of capacity, which more like is still, I think, among, like, on top of, like, you know, the female stories that we were talking about. Vulnerability in men, I think, in the media is still something that we are still trying to understand, I think. And the one case that I think where it shows a lot of of a man being vulnerable to a good extent, that is not just physical or expressing vulnerability to a love interest, is Peter Parker. And feel free to Peter Parker, Miles Morales, and like those two, I think, specifically because they are vulnerable in a lot of different ways. They are vulnerable with their emotions. They're vulnerable with their relationships. They are people. They are not this defined alpha man that can punch his way out of anything. They have issues that they address. And that, I think, is what I would like to focus on for now. So let's talk about vulnerability in men.
So I don't actually have any specific examples for this. And I know it's a rare thing that I don't have a textbook ready on. But I do like this topic in general because it is a hard thing to display, is vulnerability in, and I'd say in general, but you are right in saying specifically in men. And the only close examples I can think of would be the I can't lose you scenes. And this is the most accepted vulnerability I think men are allowed to have in media. And you're right in the, you can confess to a love interest your vulnerabilities, but and it's the closest thing we get. And again, I don't have a specific example of I can't lose you showing that vulnerability, you know, the teary head down to the chest cry that usually occurs, and that is the closest vulnerability we get. And even then, it's interesting that we're talking about the binary. It is only presented in hetero relationships towards women as the I can't lose you, I have to protect you vulnerability.
Absolutely.
And absolutely. That is, and I know it's terrible to define one end of the binary by the other when gender is made up and we are all pawns in the great scheme. But I digress. The other example of vulnerability I've seen, and I wanted to talk about anime in this section a little bit later as well, but male figures in anime are the only ones I've seen that truthfully break tropes of being really good macho hero men and do show a little bit more vulnerability, whether it be a slice of life anime or some of the more crazy out there fantasy ones. I do find that male characters do not have to apply to the I am invulnerable, I am unbreakable trope. I don't, again, have any specific examples, but that slight difference between, you know, cultures in representing men does show quite heavily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, I don't know what it is, or I think just on anime, I agree. It's weird. I can't think of any examples either, but I understand from the slice of life perspective, because in slice of life in general, or from what I know about it because of Alex, it's supposed to be that kind of sensitivity and vulnerability that everyone kind of encompasses. And that's not to say that just because men are there, that just because men are in this slice of life thing, that like they have to be vulnerable by proxy. That's not it at all. But it's through slice of life that men's vulnerability is best expressed, when it's sincere and when it is true. When I think in a lot of Western media in particular, we may be the most, I think, I don't know what the word is, but we still have yet to kind of accept that men can be vulnerable, not just to repressed. Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to get at. But in Western media in particular, men are repressed from sharing their emotions in general. You can't really express what is wrong with you unless it is one of a few things that men can be vulnerable about. Like, men, I think, from what I'm familiar with in the media, are not vulnerable about their emotions. They're not vulnerable about their mental health. They're not vulnerable about their anxieties. And they're not vulnerable about themselves. They're only really vulnerable when they're talking about a love interest, or about a power-up scene that is then going to change in 13 seconds. Truly, when it comes to vulnerability, and that is being open to yourself, and men through media aren't doing that. I think particularly in Western media is what I was trying to say, because obviously the heteronormative definition of a man, or the archetype of a heteronormative man, is one that, like I've said before, is strong, physically, mentally. They don't seem to be struggling with anything, and that isn't good. Like Alex had said, people are more complicated than that.
This is all coming back to heteronormativity again. Also,
pretty much, yeah. Gabe, do you have any?
Sorry. I was just gonna say, I'm surprised that nobody's remembering the Mr. Incredible "I'm not strong enough" scene at the final battle, when he says, like, he's vulnerable, he's not strong enough to, in theory, lose his family again, because he thought they got blown up.
Mm-hmm. That's very good vulnerability, I think. It's just like a father being worried about everything that he stands for, and not in the kind of egregious, like, you know, it's not the kind of egregious heteronormative way, but just like very sincere and a very true emotion that any parent, I think, in general would feel. But fathers, I think in particular, don't express that enough, especially when they're doing it in animated media. So that's a good point, Marie-Soleil. That was a good shout.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gabe.
Yeah, I have two examples that are like super important to me, and I've talked about them. I've talked about these series a ton on the podcast before. The first one I'm going to talk about is pretty expectable if you know me. Guess what? I'm going to talk about Chainsaw Man again. Because, okay, so like the whole story of Chainsaw Man is like, from what it sounds like, it advertises itself as this very like sort of manic and ultra violent and like crazy series, but especially in the latter half of the series, like the show is I mean, or the manga is like, it's very like coming of age about Denji as a character, as he's dealing with a lot of emotions that he like, because what it is with Chainsaw Man is that he's like, it's not just that he's like this broken person and that he's like dealing with like depression. It's that like these things are almost like it's new for him, and he's like dealing with these horrible emotions like with basically like nothing else to turn to. It's a whole thing where it's like the fact that he's basically been alone all his life and hasn't had like a lot of comforts in general. It's almost made it sort of numbing for him, and like when his life starts to get better and then immediately goes to shit again, it's almost like this new horrible feeling for him. And like what's interesting about Denji is that a lot of male characters, I find, they always have like they're like super stoic and they're super cool about this sort of stuff, and then like they'll talk to their love interest, and then that's when they'll like confide their emotions. But like Denji doesn't really have a love interest. He doesn't have a character that's a confidant. He doesn't have a character that he can really turn to. So a lot of the stuff in like the latter end of the series is basically just him dealing with this, is him like struggling to deal with this stuff in a way that it like completely alone, which is, it's horrible, but it's also something that I'm not really used to seeing in like media with men dealing with emotions, because I mean it's a horrible, unfortunate thing with male depression and men like in real life, because like a lot of because like with media and stuff, a lot of the idea that like men aren't supposed to have these emotions in general gets pushed a lot. So like even if a lot of men in real life aren't in the same exact situation as Denji, where like the people that he would turn to are literally dead, a lot of people they definitely feel like they can't talk about these things, and they can't open up about these things emotionally, because like it's exactly what you said, just like showing that emotion is like showing a sign of weakness, and that's not something that men are allowed to have. And I think it adds. I thought it added something like really special to that story, that like he's dealing with these emotions in a way that was like both like he's actually expressing these emotions and he's not just hiding them constantly, except for when he's with someone. But like, and it's also how it felt like a very real and raw like display of that emotion. Like as far as I know, I don't know if Tatsuki Fujimoto like deals with this stuff in real life,
right?
But it definitely felt like it came from like a very real and raw place.
Mm-hmm.
The second character I want to talk about is another manga that I've talked about excessively on this podcast, which is Guts from Berserk. And what's interesting about Guts to me is that like what we were talking about is like how the men are like portrayed as like being macho and like they have like the very like the big muscular guy look,
right?
And what's interesting to me about Berserk, or about Guts and Berserk, is that he has that look, and like you look at Guts and like you might think right away that it's like, oh, this is like he's like a meathead, he's just a big muscular thug. And what I think is interesting about Berserk, in contrast to even a lot of anime, because like male characters in anime are a lot more vulnerable than like Western characters, but it's almost like a contrast. Like even in anime, if a character has like traditionally masculine traits, like they're less emotional and they're less vulnerable and they have less shit to deal with. And like most anime characters in general don't really have that like super masculine look about them. Anime characters are pretty androgynous, I'd say. I'm not saying that in a negative way in any sense. But what made Berserk very special to me when I read it was the first time that I'd read a story where a character like was that stereotypical like macho aesthetic, and they were a big guy, but like Guts is dealing with shit constantly in this series. The Berserk is basically all about like depression and despair and like personal trauma and like grief, and there isn't like there are some he's not like airing this shit out, but it's not like he's like hiding it either. He's very open about it. A lot of this also comes from like the fact that it's drawn too. It's not a book, so it's like a lot of how Guts is illustrated is he just generally looks like a sad person,
right?
Like, and a lot of the series is either him dealing with his sadness, like, through his rage, or like through like just trying to quietly deal with it. The rage is also another interesting thing, because like in a lot of media with big muscular characters, they're usually like, if they get into combat, they're like very angry and yelly, like like they're like Wolverine, and like Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, he always does that scream thing that he does when he's like charging at someone.
Yeah. I was gonna comment on that actually, but I'll let you finish.
Yeah, basically all I'm saying is Berserk is like, when it comes to anger, because that's another emotion that I don't think gets like properly treated with male characters, because like Berserk is basically all about how like anger isn't something that you should like hold on to, and I feel like I just felt like that was a very unique message for like for like a male character to have like that's this idea that like anger is like a negative state of being, and the only thing that you're like really doing by holding on to it is hurting yourself.
Yeah. What I was going to comment on actually was to expand on that, because you're right. Anger, I think, is the one emotion that men feel, or men in media feel all the time. And typically the way to deal with it is by being expressive, by like shouting and screaming, which doesn't perpetuate healthy coping mechanisms, because that's how we get idiots punching drywall. But what I wanted to comment on with that actually was, I've gushed about this game and this character and this series forever, but it's Kratos from God of War, specifically Kratos from 2018's God of War, because Kratos in 2018's God of War is a much more rounded man in general. Previously in God of War games, he was known and was famous for being a very angry, a very aggressive archetype, I think, a very just one-dimensional character. Most of the trauma that he has dealt with was largely through anger. There was never any really proper way of him to cope with his mistakes. It was almost always at the extreme, pretty much. But with God of War 2018, after having a kid and essentially growing up, it's through the writing that is reflective of how well this character handles anger, because he still is a very, like, he can still be a very aggressive character, but his anger is no longer that of I guess heteronormative preconceptions. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Like, Kratos now is dealing with this intense, like with these intense emotions and intense situations more level-headedly. More importantly, because he has a son that is watching his every move. That, I think, that father-son dynamic brings out a level of vulnerability with Kratos that was never able to be explored in previous God of War games. Because when I think it's through God of War, or I think it's through Kratos in 2018's God of War, really, that really like emphasizes just how important vulnerability is in your male characters. Because if you were to if you were to sell out God of War in 2018 with an angry Kratos, it wouldn't do well, because everyone has evolved from these games. Everyone has grown up from these games. We are a lot, like, the demographic that God of War was reaching at the time was what, like young men that have been preconditioned by other angry men in the media. But 2018's God of War shows a father dealing with that trauma, dealing with that anger in a vulnerable state. He is not the God killer that he was. He is trying to be a man for his father or for his kid. And that, I think, not only brings out a level of vulnerability with Kratos that I think is important for his audience, but it brings out just how important vulnerability is to discuss when it comes to men, because we don't do that enough. We really don't, in stories and in general. There are a lot of cases where telling a young kid to just get over it and be done with it doesn't help. Like, you cannot ever you can't keep doing that, because the world as we know it is more complex and more difficult than it's ever been. And you cannot keep brushing that aside by telling a kid to get over it. You can't keep telling a man to get over it. You can't keep telling like a woman to get over it. You can't keep doing that. You have to let your characters be vulnerable. You have to let them process things in a healthiest possible way. But on top of that, you just have to let them feel. Yeah.
Emotions make us human.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, emotions can also they define a lot of what is good about us as people, but sometimes it's not obviously just emotions, but emotions in general affect us physically, psychologically, and mentally. So as our last umbrella topic, we'll be touching on mental health. This, I think, if it hadn't been obvious enough, please be aware of the trigger warnings that we'll be giving. This is your general one, but we'll be touching on depression, anxiety/panic, PTSD, sexual harassment and assault, trauma as an overarching term for that in general, and institutions and treatment. So if you do not want to listen to any of this, please be aware of that right now, and you can just skip to the available timestamp that I have provided in the description on YouTube and on Spotify. But with those trigger warnings in place, let's get into the conversation. I put depression first because that seems to be the one that is simultaneously at the what a lot of people are dealing with in media, but is also still one thing that we aren't handling well enough sometimes, because depression in itself is so wide and so broad as a definition that everyone deals with it differently. Everyone deals with their own depression differently, and it can be terrifying sometimes. So let's get into it. I don't have any examples off the top of my head. However, I do know that I can associate some common portrayals of depression in the media, and that typically involves unending sadness and self-harm, and I think isolation in general. Those three, I think, regardless of whichever story is being told, those one or all of those three seems to be a very common thing when it comes to a very depressed character.
It's interesting that you mentioned isolation as a part of depression. And I think depression is misrepresented in media, in that it's misrepresented as introversion a lot. Typically, if you are given an introverted character, the assumption or the designation is actually depression. And what I find, and this goes for not just depression, but a lot of the mental health issues we want to discuss, the cure is to change your personality. Kind of what I discussed with the tomboy to princess topic, in that if you're introverted or depressed, guess what? If you go outside and start talking to people and make friends, you're not going to be depressed anymore. Congratulations, you're cured. You got over it. And this is extremely harmful as someone who's suffered from depression, yet still remains quite a bit of an introvert, despite working through quite a bit of my own personal issues. And it's that representation in media that teaches people the wrong coping mechanisms. Like we were just talking about anger in men, teaching people that, oh, you just need to get up and get over it and stop thinking about it. When it comes to depression, is very harmful, because unless you actually deal with the root of the issues, it's still going to be there when you get back.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to weigh in?
I'm just sort of thinking about what I want to say, but you can continue.
I think I might have an example, if I'm remembering correctly. In the Vampire Diaries, when Stefan Salvatore shows up, he's this brooding character who's kind of isolated himself for most of his life because he blames himself for the death of his first love and his brother turning evil. And he's kind of he's a very sad boy. And they kind of, in the books, from what I remember and reading it, it felt like they solved his depression by giving him a girlfriend.
Oh, wow.
Because after at first, he tried to distance himself from Elena. He didn't want to date her, but she was very, persistent, in her advances. And he went along with it and ended up falling in love, and then was happy for a time. A short time. But yeah, he was happy with her.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really common trope, actually, just with like mental health in general. Like if someone has a problem, love just kind of fixes it.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, a very dangerous trope.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah, it's really bad, but it's really, really common. Also can like play into like the weird heteronormative like stereotype where a woman will fix a man who is struggling with something.
And a woman finds her place by a man's side, so she's not lost anymore. Yeah,
because there's this whole idea that women are expected to like fix men and be like their emotional outlet, I guess.
Emotional support fleshlight. Yeah.
That's
Pretty
one
much,
way to put it.
Literally the term I've heard it described to me a million times. Don't know why that one is the most common in my circles, but hey.
Makes sense.
And on the just speaking from mental health in general, I'm not talking in too much media. There are a lot of common sayings that relate to how to fix your mental health. And if someone's suffering from relationship issues, people always say, oh, you can't find someone to love if you don't love yourself. That's pretty damaging, because guess what? Everyone's deserving of finding someone who cares about them and who they care about, even if they're having their own struggles. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, that, because you should also still be working on yourself if you have your own problems. And I think media uses these buzzwords and these catchphrases and turns them into whole story arcs about how, the right one can fix you. And I think that comes a lot from the bad boy trope, which it's been a while since I've watched Grease, but...
Yeah,
I love Grease, but oh my god, it's so problematic.
Oh yeah. Like, I think speaking on the bad boy trope thing too, like the whole you know, a bad boy unlocks this side of you that you never knew you had, which it's not a good message anymore. Like,
was it ever, or did we just brush over it as a society?
It's thing. It was Grease. People were like, "Oh, music! It's so charming and shit." Like, yeah, likely it was the latter. We had just been brushing over it for so long, but now people are like, no. Like, you can still like in Alex's case, you can still enjoy it. However, like, being ignorant of the problematic issues that Grease and media like it has been portraying when it comes to discovering oneself and all that, like, you can't really look away from that, or you shouldn't try to look away from it, I think.
But we kind of skipped ahead to, you know, treatment per se of mental health.
Yeah. That's okay. It's our podcast. We can do it.
I'll be honest, I haven't seen many examples of anxiety or panic disorders very often in media, which is troubling because I know quite a few people with such disorders. And
like at least half of my friends, yeah.
Yeah, a surprising amount. And I hear them talk about it, right? And how it affects them and what it feels like to be in a hardcore panic attack or have this hardcore anxiety. And to me, as a writer, the way they describe it makes me want to write it because of how visceral the experience is and how poignant it is when they're telling it to me, that I'm surprised a bit we don't have a bit more media about it. Obviously, because of the stigma of mental health, not that surprising, but also the prevalence of such disorders should mean, well, hopefully if we're destigmatizing mental health, maybe we'll get some representation on this soon, because I don't have any examples of that.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was actually going to talk about my own example. As someone who is still dealing with his own, or with my own levels of anxiety, I think anxiety has always been the one that is the more elusive when it comes to what is portrayed in the media. Like, it's the one that I think there are common symptoms when someone is experiencing anxiety, especially when they're experiencing a panic attack or an anxiety attack. But I think anxiety is just overwhelmingly scary to think about, and that, I think, can be dealt with, or that, I think, is how a writer kind of portrays that. Like, how is it that a character shows that kind of anxiety that, first of all, I haven't seen enough of. Tyler's right. Like, I think anxiety is the thing that can be tricky to nail down because of how broad it can be. A lot of people get anxious over pretty much anything. I say that in the sense that, like, it could be any specific thing that anyone can be anxious about. And I say we as in myself, Alex, and Gabe had explored our personal writing anxieties on a previous episode of the podcast, where we talked about just, you know, what makes us anxious as amateur creative writers. And as a creative, like, from a creative writing perspective, I think I'm about to share a excerpt from Xeno that I had been working on recently. This is a trigger warning right now. It is of a anxiety attack that is happening to Porter, and I'll share it with the chat just so we all kind of get it. So everyone here will know what we're talking about, but I will read out what I say. Again, trigger warning, so just be careful of that. But anyways, the walls disintegrate. Fabrics dissipate, desk and chairs turning to dust. Her beating chest rumbles, quakes and cracks in place. Swift breath after breath chokes the corners of her throat. Magna's voice drowned out by the impeding storm, the warmth in her palms lost to the wind. At the blink of a teary, burning eye, Porter shuts down. I have long since said on podcasts before and in off conversation that Porter is a very anxious character, and at the pinnacle, she has been she deals with anxiety throughout the story, but in this pivotal moment right here, she experiences a panic attack, which isn't just for the fact that, like, you know, this is just kind of out of nowhere for shock value. It is because of Porter's anxiety that this happens, which isn't something that a lot of people with a lot of stories don't show. It is that kind of impending doom and overwhelming scariness that comes with anxiety, especially anxiety attacks, because as someone who's experienced it, it overwhelms you. And it's scary to try and even harness this kind of information. It's as the cliche goes, it's kind of like capturing lightning in the bottle. It's so difficult. And I don't know if my thing itself is a good way of showing that, but it's something that people deal with. It is something that is integral to this character, and anxiety in general is something that so many people have to struggle and deal with, that whether or not it is important for this to be shown, that remains to be seen. But yeah.
I think it's important to show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know, like, I haven't dealt a lot with anxiety or anything in my life, but I've definitely had, like, anxiety attacks. And I know, like, the first time you experience that, if you don't know what it is, it's really scary.
Mm-hmm.
And so having, like, examples of it in media, I think, is a way of letting people know that, like, not that it's, like, normal, but, like, you're not the only person who's gone through that. And you'll get through it, and this is what it is. And then, you know, once you know what something is, you can start looking into it. And that's kind of a thing with representation in general, is seeing it will like, you know, someone somewhere is going to be experiencing something, and they're not going to know what that is. But if there's media representation of what they're going through, that's an opportunity for someone to learn what they're experiencing, and, you know, to find out more about it, and to know that they're not alone, which are all very important things, especially with things like mental health.
100% agree. Yeah.
I just remembered a book that I read that had a character with anxiety, the main character, Chloe. The Darkest Powers trilogy by Kelly Armstrong. The main character, she deals with social anxiety, and, like, in the beginning of this series anyway, and it causes her to have a stutter. And I just remember there's one scene where she's at this new group home that she gets stuck at, and she's going into one of her anxiety attacks and she's stuttering, and one of the other girls there helps calm her down and walk her through it. And one of the other girls there makes fun of her for it, because, like, and I thought it was a good representation, because some people will understand, some people will help you, and other people won't. And you have to, and that's just how life is. But it was just an interesting to read that in a book directed at teens.
Mm-hmm.
I just remembered that I put Matthias having a panic attack in one of the first chapters of my story, and I remember when I brought it to a workshop, people actually inquired about it and were like, would he really have an attack right now? And, like, they didn't want it in the story, and it just makes me want to keep it in even more, because it just needs to be shown that anyone could. Cause I had already portrayed him as, like, the stronger bodyguard for Zayla in that scene. So, like, having him have the panic attack, people were like, is he really a good fit for the job? I'm like, no, that's the whole point. He shouldn't be on this job at all right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I do need to rework that scene. But yeah, I had it in there for a reason, because it's like anyone can get attacks like that, and anyone can deal with anxieties.
Mm-hmm. Especially, I think, when it comes to panic attacks in particular, because from what I understand about panic attacks, it's the most unpredictable. or it's the most unprecedented. Like anxiety attacks are things that kind of result of a buildup of information. Like it's something that you and I'm speaking from my own experience. I'm not speaking on any textbook definition, but anxiety attacks in my time have always been because of multiple reasons piling up on top of each other. Panic attacks, however, come completely out of nowhere sometimes. One thought suddenly starts spiraling into really bad thoughts that then lead into a panic attack. Or that's just, I'm citing one example. I don't know if it's true or not, but if it was part of the character, I think, like, if it was part of the character, I don't think that you should really be writing these things out, because in my example with Porter, she is inherently a very anxious person. Despite being calm and collected sometimes, she still struggles with anxiety, and I've tried portraying that as much as I can through inner monologue, through inner conflict, or through inner conflict and inner monologue in general, where she is constantly questioning just what the hell is going on. Like, am I making the right choice? Am I saying the right things? Am I doing what I'm supposed to? That kind of anxiety, especially in Porter's case, where there is so much on the line, I don't want to say it was inevitable that she was going to have a panic attack, but because of all of that anxiety building up, it's scary to think that when all of that just hits the fan, you break down like that. And in my head, the reason why I decided to write this was in two ways. One, because it is the culmination of Porter finally being as vulnerable as she can be. She has tried throughout the story to get these negative thoughts out of her head and try to fight through and be strong. However, she can't do that. And she has to accept from here on out that it is through vulnerability that makes her stronger. It is through acceptance and being able to be strong after overcoming said adversity, especially personal adversity, that makes her a stronger person. However, in part, the other reason why I did this, or why I decided to include a panic or an anxiety attack, more or less, is just to show that this stuff happens even to fictional characters. And if it is, like, if ultimately how it's written right now is not of any comfort, then I will gladly rework it over and over and over again until it is still there, but it is something that people who have dealt with anxiety understand.
You mentioned comfort, and I think that's an important term to address here. Is and like Brooke was saying with her character's critique that they didn't want it in there. I think it's because they made them uncomfortable. And if we're talking about mental illness, guess what? It should make you uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. It very much should. If this character is feeling this way because of something enough to have an attack of some form or fashion, you should be uncomfortable because they are too. And that's the point we're trying to get across. And if you feel uncomfortable, we've done our jobs as writers, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
There was something that annoyed me about one of the critiques was like, is the situation really enough to cause this? And it's like, you don't get to pick and choose what situation is going to send you spiraling. I think any situation could be that click in the brain to make you just go, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, in real life, any
specific one. It doesn't have to be like life and literal death.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't have to be like fucking
anything
in particular. It's just like it's just random bullshit. I know, like, anytime I've had it, it's always like it's just whenever I'm like in that place, I can always, like, I always feel like I know what the source is, and I always feel like I know, like, oh, it's because of this. But it's like anytime that I'm not there, I'm like, what the fuck was I freaking out about? What the fuck was that? What the fuck was that about even at all? I don't even know what cause that, and it's not something that I feel like a specific trigger is like I mean, that definitely happens for people, but I feel like that's like something that people expect to see in movies and stuff, but like it's not always caused by like something specific. It's just sometimes it can just fucking happen, and like you'll just be sitting there, you'll just be doing shit, and then you're like, oh shit, this is fucking happening, I guess.
I think Brooke, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna ask if we're gonna touch on the PTSD or not, or if I can just like clump it in right now.
It's funny you ask, because I was actually going to transition to that. So
Perfect.
You can take it from there, actually, if you want to start.
Okay. Cool. So what's been on my mind since we started the mental health portion of this is the anytime this kind of topic comes up in like the portrayals in media, I always think about Tony Stark in the third Iron Man, because that's like the one and only time basically that we ever see anything really negative happen from their line of work. And it's only in that movie, but we never actually see him get any help. Like, we don't know why he stops having panic attacks and anxiety attacks after that movie, because he has like at least 3 during the course of the movie, I think. But we never see him go to therapy. We never see him taking medication or like doing anything to change his environments. But he's just magically better in the rest of the movies. Like, we never get to see it on screen again, and it makes me very upset, because that's something that never really gets touched on in all these superhero movies, really, is how it can really negatively affect him. Like, he's super freaked out by the idea of space because he got sucked up in there and he almost got trapped too, and that's what freaks him out now.
Yeah.
And like, Steve sort of deals with like when he meets Sam, they talk about like the beds and they can't sleep, and we see that in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Bucky can't sleep and he's sleeping on the floor, just
right,
like how Sam and Steve were talking about, like, we can't sleep on these mattresses, they suck. We don't get enough. Like, I just wish there was more, because it's just slight touches that they do, and that's it.
And when Wanda, Scarlet Witch, messes with Steve's mind, there are like moments in his little vision that seem to me like, and I've seen people on Tumblr talking about it, like there's sound that could be a gunshot, there's the red lipstick looks like blood and stuff like that.
It's funny you bring up Wanda, actually, because in a way she's also dealing with her own trauma.
She's actually
throughout
like
WandaVision.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, she's the most suffrage one. Most suffrage.
Yeah.
Most suffering, sorry.
Yeah. Like, losing Vision, losing her brother. Pretty much just losing, like, to a degree, it was also losing freedom through working with Hydra for a while. Like, Wanda, like Marvel, I think in general is a very interesting case study when we're talking about exploring trauma, which is, I guess, what we're doing now. So, yeah, I agree with Tony Stark in particular. Iron Man 3 had the most, like, personal, it had one of the most personal mental conflicts that, like, superhero movies at the time didn't really explore, and that was post-trauma or post-traumatic stress, especially after everything that they had gone through as the Avengers. No sensible person, regardless of what your power level is, can walk away from that without thinking about that. And like, yeah, I agree. It's a shame that they didn't explore that further beyond Iron Man 3, because then at that point, Tony Stark was still Iron Man. Like, it's not to say that he would have necessarily hung up everything, which I guess they did anyway, but still, just exploring, I guess, PTSD through... In Marvel, I think they did better in Falcon and the Winter Soldier through Sam and Bucky. To cite a few people from TikTok who have elaborated on this, through Bucky, you had the example of sleeping on the floor. Through Sam, it was the responsibilities of being essentially a black man taking up the mantle of Captain America in a heteronormative, or in a white heteronormative world, I guess. Just exploring trauma, I think, is something that the media either really touches on well or doesn't touch on enough. So let's go into some other examples.
In a kid's cartoon Avatar, Aang, he deals with a lot of trauma starting after like the fight at the Northern Water Tribe, and how like he's terrified of going into the Avatar state.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Avatar in general, I think, deals really well with like children growing up in such a war-torn world that they're all extremely traumatized,
Mm-hmm.
and they all deal with it in very different ways, and that's kind of explored throughout the whole show.
Yeah, like the trauma, I think, for Sokka and Katara, for example, was losing their dad, losing
their mom,
and then their dad.
Mom, yeah.
And so Katara, as like a young girl, was forced into a very maternal role, which is super, super common, and often expected of like young women to step up and take care of their fathers and their brothers and their community.
Right. Yeah.
He's also the last Southern Water Tribe waterbender. Like,
oh, true. Yeah.
The weight on her shoulders bearing that, and also not being able to openly practice it because of the fear that this could get her killed.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. What other, like, exploring trauma through Avatar is such a good example, because Aang, like, his trauma is literally like being the last airbender. Like literally, like it was a genocide for for all the airbenders, basically. He is the last one. That has so much weight that, for a kid's show of all things, has handled extremely well. Other aspects too, I think the one that was the most interesting for me, and it's always the one that I love talking about, or that's always the one that I love hearing about, is Zuko's.
Mm-hmm.
Through what? Familial expectations, living up to family name, personal honor, just
child abuse.
Child abuse, yeah.
Abuse.
It's
That's
what
a pretty big one in Zuko's story.
Yeah, it's what makes Zuko, I think, everyone's favorite case study in Avatar, because when you first watched the show, or when you were first exposed to the show back in 2005, 2006, the fact that it was a show that young, I think, in modern media, and able to pack on so much for Zuko is honestly incredible. Like, I really wish I had better words to express it, but like Zuko's, like, exploring Zuko's trauma is always fascinating to go into.
It's his storyline is also like, it's very focused on that aspect of his character, and it's also like, it explores it in a really interesting way, where he has lots of like ups and downs, and it's not like it's just a straight line forward, which I think is very realistic as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So,
and speaking on vulnerability in men, how did we forget Aang and Zuko and Sokka talking about their losses and stuff with their friends and companions? That is actually a very good example that we completely overlooked.
That is true, yeah.
Yeah, Avatar's just top tier, man.
Very much so, yeah. Even with like Azula too. Like, literally, you can take any of the main like children in Avatar and break down and discuss their trauma, because Azula too, also to a degree meeting familial expectations, but it's more or less just
living up to those expectations. She's considered she's the favorite child, and that brings its own kind of trauma.
Yeah.
The favorite
child, but only because she has her uses. She was never actually told that she was loved, and her mother hated her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She was a prodigy.
Yeah. What about through Korra? I'm not too familiar with Korra much, really, but
Oh, in season 4.
She dealt with like a lot of crap. Just the same as like Aang, when Aang gets like seriously injured and he basically gets killed and revived, and he doesn't want to do anything with Avatar, and even when he has his fears with fire.
Korra at one point literally like runs away to deal with that stuff.
Literally gets like messed up by Zahir, and
That's his name. I was trying to remember.
She takes a long time to get healed and get better, and she runs away, and she just does a bunch of like street fighting, underground stuff, just trying to figure herself out. She has like hallucinatory visions. She's like broken. Actually, someone pointed out recently that I only just noticed that they also animated her as skinnier during that time. Like she literally lost a lot of her muscle mass and her oomph, and she cut her hair, and she just went through a massive transformation because she got messed up, and she has to deal with Zahir for the rest of Korra. Like Zahir is always there, always affecting her. So is Amon. Amon really messed her up in the head. Everything that she ends up fighting, she has to fight internally for like the rest of the series.
Right, yeah.
No one else really stands out other than maybe like Tenzin taking on the burden of reestablishing like the air temple and the air nomads.
I mean, Boomy also like has to deal with being this normal kid when both of his siblings are benders.
True.
And his father's the frigging Avatar.
Until he becomes a bender.
And nobody believes all of his cool war stories.
Yeah.
Got Team Boomy over here. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair. I don't want to think. I don't have much knowledge on this, so I can't really follow up on it. But I think through all, like, I heard war, and then instantly it comes into like soldiers and how their trauma is explored. Like a lot of what we kind of associate as post-traumatic stress is through, or a lot of the stories that at least I grew up familiarizing myself when it came to post-traumatic stress was the stress of soldiers, or was the lived experiences and horrors of being a soldier, be it from World War II, the Vietnam War, or modern conflict. And I say that I can't really speak up on this because I don't understand that, and I don't want to kind of take that in a direction that I will likely not know anything of. But I think when it comes to like exploring war story, like when it comes to exploring soldiers through I don't know where I was going. I think war, like PTSD explored through soldiers is a very common thing.
Like the only way we really get PTSD is through soldiers and veterans.
Yeah, that's definitely the stereotype.
Yeah. When
that's a bad stereotype too, because that leads to like a lot of like the like how like hard it is for people with PTSD to get taken seriously because like they aren't combat vets. Like like you see that shit I see that shit so often. It's always so disheartening whenever I see people like having that attitude towards PTSD.
And we have to remember what PTSD stands for, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, meaning that is this what comes after a traumatic stress. The traumatic stress itself typically being an event or series of events. And there are lots of things that can be considered traumatic stress, from abusive childhoods leading to PTSD, sexual assault leading to PTSD, even the loss of a loved one, car accidents. All these things cause trauma and stress, and as such, symptoms of PTSD and complex PTSD can amount from such occurrences. because again, it's kind of in the name. This is post-traumatic stress. If something traumatically stressful happened, there's a chance that this occurs. It's the way the brain tries to deal with it, regardless of what the onset issue was.
Yep.
I just thought of another example of trauma and PTSD in a book character, Harry Potter. Like, his trauma as a victim of child abuse, it says in the books, like, he hides food under loose floorboards in his bedroom. He hides in his bedroom to avoid his family members. He leaves the house and stays out of the house as long as he possibly can to avoid said family members. After Goblet of Fire, he has nightmares about the graveyard and everything else. Like, the author might be who she is, but she does a decent job of letting us know that Harry is not okay.
If we want to talk about sexual assault and harassment and mental illness relating from that, we can, but it is getting rather late.
That is true.
Yeah, it's 12.
Yeah, it's almost midnight. It's literally 10 minutes to midnight. God, we need to plan these podcasts out a little bit better. But anyway, yeah, I think despite the importance of wanting to talk about sexual harassment and assault, I think that would likely be a conversation for another day. As a lot of things go when it comes to these things, we always have plenty of things to say. However, time, I think, is our enemy. But I guess to kind of start wrapping up the mental health section and the podcast overall, I think because mental health is so personal and it can be so difficult sometimes to like understand and kind of define what is going on in our respective heads, I think we need to be exposed to, like, I guess we just need to be exposed to these kinds of things a little bit more. Obviously, not just for the sake of shock value or being there, because that's obviously disingenuous, but like proper, comfortable depictions of, or proper, I say comfortable loosely, but like proper depictions of like panic attacks, like depressive episodes, dealing with post-traumatic stress. It's just a thing that will make these conversations more familiar for the public and more or less gauge everybody to start taking this thing seriously. Because we as creative writers are doing our best to discuss it in our own way. However, we are still just a small platform. We, as of this episode, may be making our own strides, but our voices are not enough. And so, I guess is like an open message and like an Optimus Prime call to the wind. If you somehow find yourself listening to this and you've listened to this all the way up until now, please do take the things that is portrayed in the media with a level of seriousness, because there are some things that we as a society should be adapting more, and there are some things as a society that we should be phasing out. Like, accept that queerness cannot be solely defined, accept that mental health cannot be solely defined, accept that queer people, black people, people of color in general can be leads without sticking to certain stereotypes. Remember that the binary is more complex than just dresses and guns. And remember, I think in general, that we as people are just more complex than you will ever know. And that, I think, is a good way to end off tonight and season 4. So, with all of that being said, thanks everybody for listening in. You can find all of our social media down in the description below, both individually and as the InkGuild. We are on Twitch, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter at the InkGuild. Our main home is on YouTube. However, we are also on Spotify. And that, I think, concludes it for plugs. For our closing segment, which I promise will be very quick because, again, it is very late, I want to touch on two things. One, because this is our season 4 finale, did we have a favorite episode?
Any with me in it.
Oh,
They are top contenders, I'll give it that. Genuinely, I think my favorites were the Shadow and Bone episode, the video game protagonist episode, the fantasy races episode, and I think tonight, this one is definitely one of my favorites.
Shadow and Bone was definitely really fun to talk about. Season 2 has been confirmed to anyone who doesn't know yet, and I'm very excited about it. And Queer Coding was also a very good episode.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed the villains episode.
yes.
All right, I guess Brooke also enjoyed the...
Tonight was fun. Shadow and Bone was fun, but extremely chaotic and very busy because there's so many of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I did like villains.
Gabe, any personal favorites?
Shadow and Bone, definitely.
Fair enough. All right. So, as a final closing segment, what is one thing that you would want to talk about in season 5? And personally, I would like to do a follow-up on... Actually, no, I don't want to do that. Never mind. I'll let everyone else go before I kind of offer mine. Because I guess I wasn't thinking about which one, or which one specifically.
Personally, I like to talk linguistics and language creation for creative writing. And I think the idea of doing like workshops as podcast would be a very fun time.
Yeah, I've thought about that too.
Whether it be critique workshops or like technique workshops where we talk about favorite examples and, you know, have our own little creative writing lessons instilled inside.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, the one that I have been wanting to do, or I have two. The one that I've been wanting to do for so long now, and hopefully we either do it as part of a season or off season, is one where we just talk about whatever the fuck we want. Like, it doesn't have to be creative writing related. It's just friends being friends. And the other, I think, is also a workshop. I'm also would love to do like a creative writing workshop as kind of podcast where we just show all of our listeners just how we work when it comes to giving feedback. And yeah.
I'd kind of like an episode where we talk about like rebooting shows and movies and books and stuff, rebooting, remaking them, and the pros and cons of it, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Brooke, Alex?
I can't think of anything.
I just really want to talk about Avatar and Korra now.
Oh God, yeah, we've still yet to do a full episode on Avatar. Yeah, fuck, we never did that. It's been talked about for so long, doing an Avatar only episode, but I think hopefully next season we'll get to that. Gabe, how about you?
I mean, for me, it's that one episode that we were talking about where it was like there no scripts or no set topic, just like grab some whiskey and just shoot shit for like however long the OBS will sustain itself for. The other episode that I want to do just for my own like chaotic personality is I think it's I don't know if I think we talked about it with the Soy Boys on their episode, but we were talking about how like you're playing Nier Automata right now.
I knew you wanted to do a Nier episode.
not just Nier, it's like a Drak. I just want to do a Drak and Nier deep dive and just like drive myself insane explaining the lore of Drak and Nier for how many hours it will possibly take to do that. I remember we talked about that. That sounded like a great time to record.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't think of any more. I would love to do
horror in writing. I love horror as a genre, and doing a full deep dive on horror stories and how to write it, that's one I want.
That's true. I've thought about a D&D episode for all the D&D players in here. Although I don't know how to
Also yes. Also definitely yes.
Yeah. A D&D episode.
Second a D&D episode.
Okay, yeah, that's my vote.
All right, okay. And then yeah, I wanted to do a soundtracks episode, which is like very niche, but like I love like soundtracks within themselves have their own unique stories and really complement stories, so I would love to just gush about like my favorite soundtracks. I think though that's just kind of going off into speculation. And as of right now, for all of us here, it is literally 1 minute to midnight, which I think is the longest recording session that we've ever done. So I will not hold up anyone any further and say thank you, everybody, for listening in. Thank you for season 4. Thank you to everyone here, everyone here who have been joining joining us on these podcasts. Thank you to Tyler, Charbel, and Marcus for debuting with us on season 4. And I look forward to seeing all of us again in season 5. For everyone listening, we are all friends outside of this podcast, so we'll see each other like probably tomorrow. But yeah, thanks everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you.